A red-haired girl sat by a stone statue of a dragon and prayed for her fate, asking the goddess Artel to help her. Rebecca was just sure that she knew everything, because she always followed everything that was happening. This young lady was sad that her father was going to marry her, but she herself did not want it yet. The girl was also worried that her parent wanted her to stop practicing alchemy, hinting that she would remain an old maid. She herself was already 24 years old, and her father said that he was not going to wait any longer, so he made a decision. That morning, he came to her and made a statement, and she immediately began to interrogate why she should give up alchemy. She also didn't understand why she, a noble young lady, had to marry. The Astane Empire, in which she lived, was one of the strongest on the entire continent. And the Oaklane family, to which this girl belonged, had had authority since the founding of the empire. Living up to the rank of legendary alchemists, the members of the Oaklane family showed great skill in alchemy. The descendants naturally improved their skills in alchemy for the family business, and this allowed the family to maintain its reputation. Today, the Oaklane family owns the continent's largest alchemical workshop. Hames Oaklane was also an outstanding alchemist today, and his students were even afraid of his skill. One day he went into the workshop where people greeted him cautiously, but he came here for a different reason. This man only wanted to see Rebecca, and asked her not to pay attention to him and continue to do his own thing. This man was also looked up to by many alchemists. In addition, he used this science to create various weapons. In this way, he significantly helped the empire to increase its military power several times, and from this, Hames was nicknamed the ancestor of weapons. This man also had a wonderful red-haired daughter who inherited a high level of concentration from him. But this girl was also the most valuable treasure for her father, and he always wanted only the best for her. When Rebecca saw her father, she was immediately worried that he had come here and began to ask how he was feeling today. Hames admitted that he was much better today, but just now he needed to discuss something with her. The girl thought it was wonderful, because she was just going to visit him tonight and show him what she was able to do. Rebecca also admitted that at first she worked on one ointment that perfectly heals various scars. But this was not what the father was interested in now, and he asked the girl to stop doing this activity. Rebecca still did not immediately understand her father, and then he clarified that he no longer wanted his daughter to practice alchemy. He then continued that the girl was already 24 years old and she shouldn't waste her precious time on it. She was afraid that Judith might say something to him, because Judith caught her while she was secretly reading a book at the ball. The girl hid in the corner behind the curtains then and thought that no one would notice, and now she asked her father for forgiveness for this. But Hames hadn't come to her about it. He had told her that if she didn't get married that year, she would be a spinster. Until then, her father had allowed his daughter to do whatever she wanted, but it was time to leave it behind and prepare for the wedding. Rebecca immediately protested, because she did not want to get married at all. She already felt quite fine. She then stated that she was going to continue working as an alchemist in the workshop as before. But her father believed that William would not allow her to do this, and also admitted that he had told him something. The man stated that he refused to take care of Rebecca after her father left, but she knew that Hames did not have much personal property. He was ready to transfer all his property to his daughter, but he understood that this would not be enough for her to live on her own. The girl continued to protest. She was ready to live even in poverty, but she wanted to do what she loved. Rebecca also felt very happy in such a job now, but her father still asked her to stop. Hames then confessed that he had also made a promise to her mother, and that he should not have allowed her to practice alchemy at all. Rebecca did not understand why her father was against it and thought that she was incapable of making a living from alchemy. But Hames asked her to remember everything she had done up to that day, and that it was all worth absolutely nothing. After that, the father again asked his daughter to stop practicing alchemy and prepare for the wedding, because he was doing all this for her. And after this conversation with her father, Rebecca went to the statue of the dragon and shared her misfortune. The girl did not want to get married, but continued to live as she does now, while she believed that such a desire was quite reasonable. Rebecca also remembered that her father had never scolded her before, but today it seemed to her that he thought she was a talentless alchemist. She turned to Artel again because she needed to know the truth that Rebecca was indeed a great alchemist. The girl was also going to stay strong, as she knew that it was not yet the time to create one elixir. Then Rebecca remembered the time that the legendary Oaklane had mentioned, and which had not yet come. So she decided to continue to stand up for Oaklane's legacy and her pride as an alchemist. At the same time, the girl thought about what to do right now, and even decided that it would be right to just run away from home. The girl even burst into tears because she did not know what to do now, and suddenly a handkerchief appeared in front of her. Rebecca thought it was Artel who had given her the handkerchief, but she knew it couldn't be. Then the girl felt it and noticed that this handkerchief smelled good and was also very soft to the touch. She didn't know who could have left this thing here, and suddenly a young man appeared around the corner who looked quite rich. It was the Duke of the Empire, Carlisle Rovenster, whose beauty made all the girls go crazy. He was also the first swordmaster to appear in the Empire in the last 500 years. But besides his radiant divine face, many women liked something else about him. This man also had a very handsome, muscular body like a knight's, which showed that he was very strong. In addition to his broad shoulders, Carlisle was also tall, and all this delighted the girls. The ladies were simply sure that their goddess Artel had bestowed her love on this duke, which is why he was so glorious. On this day in the palace, the duke was not in a very good mood, but even his frown was liked by the girls. At this time, he was approached by the daughter of the Duke of Carseus, named Haley, who was also famous for her beauty throughout the area. As the other girls greeted her as well, she wondered why Carlisle was delayed, since he had been summoned by the old emperor. The aristocrat standing at a distance even whispered that Haley was acting as if she were already the wife of the young duke. And he, having apologized to the ladies, hastened to follow the emperor, passing by Haley as well. He only glanced silently in her direction as he passed by, but did not say a word to her and soon disappeared behind the door. At the same time, his gaze seemed so cold to the young duchess that she even felt chills all over her body. Soon, Carlisle arrived at His Majesty's and greeted him with all courtesy. The emperor, in turn, asked him to leave such formalities and decided to get down to business at once. The short, rather plump ruler began to wonder when the young duke was going to get married. Carlisle bowed again and explained that he had no such intentions at this time. Then the emperor coughed and shamed the duke that he could not rest in peace until he had settled down. The young man in response decided to tease His Majesty a little, saying that he was still quite healthy for his age. But he only gloomed, and then explained that in fact, nothing can predict what can happen to a person at this age at any moment. The emperor then recalled that Carlisle's father had always been his closest friend, as well as the husband of his dear sister. The ruler will never forget that, being still very young, his son-in-law gave his life for him on the battlefield. But now the emperor was disappointed that Carlisle, like a heartless fellow, did not listen to him at all. And that even if he is a swordmaster who has gone beyond human capabilities, he is still human. The emperor also remembered that the duke's father was very worried that he was leaving his son at such a young age and begged to be at the wedding instead of him. Carlisle replied that he had not yet met the girl he really wanted to marry. Although at the same time, all the other ladies literally did not give the young handsome man a pass. But now the emperor was almost angry that this was still going on and the duke would not come to his senses. Carlisle began to ask him for a little more time, and soon he promised to introduce the girl to His Majesty. Anyway, the emperor did not believe the duke after all. He had promised him this many times, and now he decided to give him a direct order. The young man was supposed to get married within the next year, and no excuses would work anymore. And if the duke did not do so within the specified time, the emperor would force him to marry for convenience. After meeting the old emperor, Carlisle stopped on the balcony to get his thoughts in order for a while. He was soon joined by Oberith Astane, a young prince who is also the current emperor. He asked what his father had said to the duke, and Carlisle confessed that he had received orders to marry within a year. The prince thought that this was even rude on his father's part, and decided that, judging by this, his aunt had already surrendered to him. The duke did not understand why this amused Oberith so much, since he himself knew well that he would have to marry someday. After all, the bloodline should not be interrupted. Besides, he was already 28 years old and it was time to settle down. Oberith also suggested that he should court Lady Haley, as she was a beauty that no one else could match. But Carlisle didn't care about her appearance, and the prince also hinted that she wouldn't let him marry anyone else. Oberith also believed that by refusing to marry her, he might antagonize House Carseus, but the duke did not care. The young duke decided to go back to the temple, where he had the most comfortable refuge in the whole world. There he always behaved politely with the ministers, and they always received him with respect. But on this day, when he entered the church, he paused on the threshold as he noticed a girl praying from afar. Carlisle recognized this girl once he saw her hiding in the closet just to read a book. The duke also remembered how 10 years ago he had been hiding from other girls in the garden, and they were restlessly looking for him everywhere. Finding shelter behind a thick tree trunk, the duke began to wonder how he could get out of there unnoticed. And having chosen the right moment, he rushed to run as fast as he could, while trying not to be seen by anyone. When he reached the palace, Carlisle stopped at a small room, and realizing that it was a storeroom, he decided to hide there. It was in this storage room that the duke saw for the first time a young red-haired girl reading a book. She was quite carried away, but still heard a rustle around her and looked around to see who had come there. Seeing the handsome young man in front of her, Rebecca immediately exclaimed, but rather because his appearance was unexpected for her. Then she began to ask who he was, and whether he had come here to look for her, hoping that this was not the case. The guy did not dare to answer her but waved his hands, making it clear that this was not why he was here. This made Rebecca happy. She was in a cheerful mood again, and she smiled sweetly at the visitor. Carlyle thought that he was the only one who had decided to hide here, but it turned out that someone else had thought of it. Meanwhile, the girl returned to reading, trying not to pay attention to the young Duke, whom she did not recognize. And he, in turn, decided that it would be better to leave this place before the girl attacked him like the others. But then he noticed that all her attention was focused on the book, and she herself was trying to solve some formula. There was also a party going on at the castle at this time, and Carlyle couldn't understand why she decided to read a book instead. At the same time, even his younger sister was so happy to come here that she spent several hours preparing. The Duke decided to carefully peek at what kind of book it was, from which this girl could not tear herself away, and was literally absorbed in studying. Then he noticed that it was alchemy, and the red-haired cute girl carefully studied each line. Rebecca tried to understand one of the formulas, but then the Duke tried to distract her again. She didn't even turn around right away, and then Carlyle came closer and decided to clarify something for her. Pointing to the formula, the young Duke explained that she had misunderstood the meaning at one point, so she couldn't do it. The girl took a closer look, and then she seemed to have an epiphany, as she saw at what point her thoughts went wrong. She then politely thanked the young man for helping her solve this problem and gave him her smile again. But then she stared at the book again, and the Duke found her behavior even a little strange. After all, for the first time he met a girl who practically did not pay attention to him, unlike others. He even wondered if this person knew who he really was. But then he took another closer look at her. From her red hair, as well as from the Book of Alchemy, the guy determined that she could be a member of the Oak Lane family. Carlyle also decided that she, like him, did not like high society events at all, so she was hiding here with a book. At the same time, the Duke noticed that this girl looked quite nice, and also that for the first time he did not hate such communication. Now in the temple, Carlyle decided to hide back around the corner and listen to what she was praying for. At the same time, the young Duke noticed that this girl had not changed at all, although 10 years had passed. But then he also saw that Rebecca was not just praying, but she was crying. And then Carlyle decided to approach her. At first the Duke thought that someone had offended her, but without rushing to ask, at first he simply put a handkerchief next to her. Feeling a little timid at this, Carlyle disappeared again around the nearest corner and watched. After making sure that the girl was grieving at being married, he decided to return to the palace, realizing that this could be a chance for him as well. There he met his mother, Abigail Rovinster, who was also the younger sister of the former emperor. The lady noticed that her son looked much better than she expected, despite the fact that her brother immediately laid his decree on him. Carlyle confirmed that he had technically done so, but Abigail still did not understand why the young Duke looked like this. The guy hesitated for a while, and then asked his mother what she thought about the Oak Lane family. The lady confessed that she considered her to be a family like theirs, with a long history dating back to the founding of the Astane Empire. Abigail also mentioned that the first Oak Lane was a legendary alchemist, and Hames Oak Lane also made a huge contribution to the development of the empire. Then the lady thought for a while and remembered that Hames also had a daughter, and decided that her son was interested in this girl. Unexpectedly, Carlyle confirmed his mother's assumption and said that he was going to send a marriage proposal to Rebecca Oak Lane. After a while, the entire family of alchemists gathered in the living room, and it seemed that a very important conversation was about to take place. Only Rebecca was missing, but soon she knocked and then asked what they were going to talk about. Her brother William looked quite serious, like the rest of the family. Looking at the faces of each relative, Rebecca immediately realized that the matter was very serious, and decided to prepare for the worst. After all, William's wife Judith, who was as serious as his father-in-law, was also present. William did not say many preludes, but only handed his sister an envelope and explained that she had received a marriage invitation. Rebecca did not understand now why her brother had such a gloomy expression on his face, since he himself had recently wanted her to get married. Opening the envelope, the girl prayed to Artel, realizing that now she really had no choice but to stop practicing alchemy. However, she was very surprised when she saw that it was a letter from the Duke of Carlisle, who was asking her to marry him. Still, after a while, Rebecca packed up and headed in a carriage to the palace, wearing the most beautiful outfit. Upon arriving at the place, the girl also noticed that the Duke's estate was on a completely different level and even admired this sight. Immediately after she got out of the carriage, she was met by the butler, who informed her that His Grace was already waiting in the reception room. At the same time, Rebecca was nervous, which she could not stop shaking. But she also paid attention to the interior, which was simply luxurious. Rebecca also felt a little awkward because she hadn't worn such a chic dress for ages. And soon she reached the door, where she was met by other servants and invited to go inside. There she immediately saw a young man who introduced himself as the Duke of Carlisle Rovenster. The girl also decided to greet him in response, but at the same time, due to excitement, she immediately stumbled and almost fell. The Duke pretended not to notice this and invited her to sit down and taste the tea he had prepared for today's meeting. Rebecca found it very nice that his lordship did not show any sign of her clumsiness, but tried to control herself. Only she still could not relax and was tense all the time, and in order to hide it, she began to drink tea incessantly. Carlisle found it amusing, and he chuckled, but then decided to talk about the marriage proposal he had sent her. From the beauty that Rebecca fell into, she even forgot for a moment why she was there, and after a sharp mention of marriage, she even choked. Still, she admitted that she was very surprised by this, while adding that she simply did not deserve such a great person as him. The Duke laughed again, remembering the last time she had completely ignored him to read a book. The girl, meanwhile, continued to insist that she was not worthy of accepting such an offer. But Carlisle decided to honestly share his intentions with her, that he wasn't really going to marry her. Rebecca felt even more surprised now because she did not understand why she had to send an offer in such a case. She also began to tell him that the proposal had made her nervous a lot, and had also been carefully preparing for a long time. At the same time, the girl remembered the words of Judith, who believed that this marriage with a member of the royal family would be a gold mine. Her brother also did not remain silent and argued that Rebecca simply had to accept this offer, no matter what. This couple also told the girl that if she refused this marriage, then she would cease to be a member of the family for them. And when Rebecca thought about how much pressure Judith and William had put on her about this, she noticed that the Duke was staring at her. From this look, the girl even forgot what she wanted to say to him, but he asked not to worry, and she could say whatever she wanted. Rebecca, however, did not dare to speak for the time being, and Carlisle decided to explain to her the real reason for his invitation. The Duke explained that she were actually in the same boat, and the girl began to guess what he meant. He recalled that Rebecca is also under pressure from people to get married, and added that he has the same situation. The girl decided that in his case it was his mother, but Carlisle explained that he was ordered by the former emperor. Therefore, he is in a somewhat difficult position, since he does not really want to get married anytime soon. Rebecca now understood that if it was difficult for her to go against her own family, then it must be much more difficult for the Duke. Carlisle also admitted that after receiving the order from His Highness, he felt quite confused. So he went to the Temple of the Artel, and Rebecca realized that it was there that he learned of her sorrow, since he had heard everything himself. The Duke confessed that this was exactly what happened, and then the girl also realized that he was the one who gave her that handkerchief. Carlisle also apologized that he didn't really want to dry it, so he tried to stay unnoticed. But he also thought that their meeting had to be part of Artel's will, so he decided to take such a step. And while Rebecca was experiencing some shock, the Duke offered her to conclude an arranged engagement with him again. Now the girl felt even more confused, although she understood what the young groom really meant. This meant that they wouldn't actually be engaged, and they would only need to pretend to be one. Carlisle also recalled that usually an engagement can last from 3 months to 2 years, and offered to sign a contract for 2 years. Rebecca realized that he himself wanted to avoid the pressure that was being put on him because of marriage, so he decided to arrange a fake engagement. The girl even praised him for such a good idea, because after 2 years they will be able to break off their engagement. But then she realized that even after that, their relatives would begin to put pressure on them again, so this is only a way to postpone the inevitable. Carlisle confirmed that she had noticed this correctly, but also assured that in 2 years the situation would be very different. The Duke then reminded him again that he had received an order from the former emperor, but in 2 years he would no longer be able to order him anything. Rebecca thought for a moment, and then realized that he was referring to the tradition of hatching. This was a tradition that could only be found in the imperial family of the Astein Empire. After all, the first ruler was the son of the great dragon Artel, who was worried when her son took the throne. So she stayed in the imperial capital to look after him, as well as all his children and descendants. The Artel remains the custodian to this day, and in honor of her motherly love, the family created a tradition of hatching. This is the time when the abdicated emperor provides assistance during the reign of the newly crowned emperor. Also, according to this tradition, the former emperor retains part of his imperial power, so it is impossible to carry out his order. The Duke explained that in 2 years, the former emperor would completely relinquish his power and go south. Then Rebecca wondered if the current emperor would put pressure on Carlisle to get married. Ravenster knew that Oberith would not make his relationship with the swordmaster bad over such a small thing as marriage. The Duke then offered to proceed with their arranged engagement, and begged Rebecca to stay there on the pretext of wedding lessons. The girl was surprised by such an offer, but Carlisle assured that his family was aware of their agreement, and she should not worry. He also added that Rebecca will officially receive wedding lessons from his mother, but at the same time, she can continue to do her own thing. The Duke also promised to turn one of the annexes into a personal workshop for her, where she can enjoy her favorite business. Rebecca even lost the gift of speech for a while because she never even dared to dream that she would have a personal workshop. And now this workshop would be only for her, and this offer seemed very tempting to her. But that wasn't all. The Duke also added that after the dissolution of the engagement, he would continue to sponsor it for the rest of his life. Carlisle promised to prepare a place of residence for the girl, as well as provide the necessary equipment. Rebecca could also choose whether to live in the imperial capital or elsewhere, but the Duke promised to take care of her financial well-being. Then he also began to speculate that he was ready to invest in a larger workshop for her. Rebecca decided to stop him and admitted that she couldn't actually create things of value such as weapons. Carlisle assured that she shouldn't worry about it anyway, since his family and he personally have enough money. Then Rebecca decided that this young man really hated marriage since he decided to do this. The Duke also stated that everything he had just said would be included in the contract, and he had no intention of canceling anything. The girl was grateful to Carlisle for such a generous offer, but still she asked for a little time to think things over. He did not mind, and allowed her to consider the proposal for as long as necessary, and invited her to meet when she made a decision. The Duke also added that his letter with the proposal should buy them both some time in any case. Soon the girl returned home and was immediately met by the whole family, who were curious about how her meeting went. But she was in no hurry to tell them, so she herself could not yet realize and accept everything, so she promised to tell them the next day. Then she rushed up the stairs to her room, not listening to her relatives continue to call her. Once at her place, Rebecca immediately closed the door behind her, hoping that no one would break in, and she wanted to catch her breath. But a minute later, her father came into her room anyway, and it was obvious that he was not going to back down from questioning. Still, he began to speak softly to her, realizing that she was having a hard time right now, but he said that everyone was very worried about her, especially Locke. Hames also understood how hard it was for her because upon her return, she immediately went to her room and not to the studio. But then he pointed out that the Duke was a great man, and Rebecca only retorted that he was too good for her. Her father understood that becoming a duchess would entail many responsibilities, but he was confident that his daughter would cope with everything. Hames also recalled that over the years, the Rovensters have been friendly to them, and this is the best family to marry. At the same time, the girl thought that this was not an engagement at all, but a contractual contract with which they would deceive the family and all of Aston. Hames admitted at this time that that night in a dream, Rebecca's mother wondered if she was happy. But he woke up before he could answer this question, and then he remembered that his wife had also gone through many difficulties, and all because she did not have an official title. But now, in the next dream, Hames was going to share the good news with her. After that, the father left his daughter so that she could have a normal rest, but she still could not recover for some time. The girl did not know what to do and decided that practicing alchemy was the best way to clear her head. She then went to the workshop, but when she arrived, she was greeted by puzzled students. They looked like something really terrible had happened, but they were afraid to admit it. But then Rebecca herself noticed that something was wrong with her desk now, and there was nothing on it now. The girl immediately began to interrogate the students why this happened, but they again could not find the words to explain to her. However, one of them admitted that the day before, her brother had ordered them to put away all her belongings, as they were no longer needed since she was getting married. Rebecca hoped that at least her data remained, which she was writing down, but the students explained that there was nothing left at all. The girl didn't know what to feel at that moment. She was both angry and at the same time felt betrayed. William sat in his study and thought that he would never have thought that his sister would marry the Duke. On the other hand, he thought it was a great chance for her. And suddenly he heard loud footsteps outside the door. And the next moment, the door opened with a bang and an angry Rebecca appeared in it. She immediately began to yell at her brother and interrogate why he decided to get rid of her desk in the workshop and her inventions. And without even letting him answer, the girl also began to interrogate where he had gone all this. William himself was angry that his sister was showing such anger towards him, and for a while they just threw words at each other. But then her brother said that there was a limit to her arrogance and she should not cross it. William also stated that at the moment he is the head of the Oak Lane family and they should show respect to him. Only Rebecca was not going to put up with this, and again began to demand that her brother answer her questions. At this time, when the door was still open, and the servants in the corridor, who had heard everything, even began to whisper. And this angered William even more, because his sister dared to humiliate him in front of all the servants. Then he started yelling at his sister again, hinting that she hadn't learned anything from her father. And then he also said that soon she would get married anyway, so it was time for her to forget about all her childhood dreams. William also shouted that everything his sister had previously done was useless garbage and nothing more. He then admitted that the only reason her desk was in the workshop was because of her father. In response, Rebecca shouted that her father had nothing to do with it, and she passed the test like everyone else. William went on to say that she hadn't done anything useful in all this time, so she didn't deserve to be called an alchemist. And then the girl asked what he himself had done during this time, because in fact he took this place only because he was a son. Her brother began to argue again, proving that he could at least understand what was important and what was not, while she was doing her experiments. Then Rebecca decided that it was worth making the philosopher's stone, but William said that these were only dreams, and he was striving for real success. The girl realized that her brother was referring to the development of weapons, but also recalled that he himself had failed in this many times. She explained that she found out about this, since he had squandered all their family wealth for this. At this point, Rebecca decided to end and only thanked him for helping her with her thinking. William did not understand what she was talking about at first, and then the girl explained that she intended to become engaged to the Duke of Ravenster. She also said that now she has a premonition that she will not regret any of her decisions. After that, Rebecca slammed the door, and William was left angry, but at the same time he hoped that after the wedding, she would not leave her family. Still, he tried to reassure himself that everything would be all right, and that all he had to do now was marry his sister. After visiting her brother, Rebecca showed up to her father and immediately began to scream, which made him very frightened. But then she threw herself into his arms and began to complain about her brother, telling him what he had done. Hames felt sorry for his daughter, but then reminded her that she was going to give it up anyway, so there was no need to be so upset. He also explained that she would soon get married, and after that, her inventions would not be of any use. Although at the same time her father agreed that William did not do the right thing, because he threw away her things without permission. But he also saw the good side of it, because now Rebecca will be able to focus on the main thing. And then the girl decided to ask if she would have been accepted into the workshop if she had not been a member of the Oak Lane family. Hames was confused, not knowing how to answer his daughter correctly, and from this he began to suffocate again and he coughed. But when he felt better, he asked his daughter not to be angry, because it did not matter to him whether she was an alchemist or not. He also added that she would forever remain a precious child for him, but then a coughing fit seized him again. At this time, Rebecca wondered if her father had ever recognized her as an alchemist. She also now realized that there wasn't really a single person who considered her an alchemist until today. Then she decided that she would definitely sign a contract, and everyone would see how talented she really was. The next morning, while the Duke was still going about his business, the butler came to him and announced the arrival of a guest. He explained that Lady Oak Lane had come, and Carlyle was curious why she had decided to call on him at such an early hour. The Duke, of course, was waiting for her visit, but he did not think that it would come so soon. Nevertheless, he agreed to receive her. When he went out to her waiting room, he saw that she was sitting modestly in an armchair, waiting to meet him. The Duke approached her and greeted her first, but he felt that he was not at all worried about her appearance. The girl, in turn, began to apologize for such an early visit, but Carlyle assured that she should not worry so much. From the look on her face, he thought something had happened, but Rebecca assured him that everything was fine. There were just some problems during the night. And then the Duke asked if she had breakfast, since he had not yet eaten himself, and invited her to eat together. But then he still suggested that he guessed the reason for her visit and believed that she had made a decision. In a rather bold voice, Rebecca confirmed that she was willing to accept his proposal to enter into an engagement contract. The Duke was even curious as to why she had decided to agree, since she had seemed very indecisive to him last time. The girl was about to answer, but at that moment the servants brought breakfast, and she decided to be silent for a while until they left. Carlisle explained that they had been brought a signature soup prepared by their chef, and it was famous throughout the capital. After tasting the first spoonful, Rebecca noticed that the dish was really very tasty, and that she had never tasted it before. At this time, the butler, who was standing aside, did not quite understand the Duke's actions, since he had already had breakfast a little earlier. And during breakfast, Carlisle also assured the bride-to-be that as long as their contract was valid, he would consider her his man. Even though it was only a formal engagement, he promised to treat her with the utmost respect. The girl thanked him and promised to do the same, but she wasn't sure how much she could share her situation with him. Carlisle assured her again that she had nothing to be ashamed of, and that he wouldn't even get angry if she cursed in conversation. Then he suggested that we also call each other by their first names, especially since he noticed that they actually had a lot in common. They both did not want to participate in the life of high society, and also wanted other things to be a priority. The girl did not think long about it, and she was even pleased to accept such an offer. Then the Duke asked again what it was that had made Rebecca make such a quick decision about the engagement. Seeing that the atmosphere was not tense at all, the girl decided to share with him something that had happened to her. Listening to her, Carlisle learned that this girl had dreamed of becoming an alchemist since childhood, and Rebecca confidently stated that after she followed her father to the workshop, she could not imagine herself as someone else. At the same time, other of her peers and young ladies attended etiquette classes, as well as learning to make bouquets and embroider. She herself stayed with her father to practice alchemy, and at the age of 15 she passed the exam, receiving the highest score. Then she had her own, albeit small, desk in the workshop, and she thought that everyone in the family and the workshop recognized her as an alchemist. But yesterday, she learned the brutal truth that no one had ever really seen her as an alchemist. The Duke objected to this, because he believed that he was the most hard-working alchemist in front of him now. The girl didn't understand why he was so sure, but he explained that he understood it when he saw her hands. Carlisle noticed that there was a scar on his thumb, indicating a cut with a knife. He also noticed several scars from a slight burn, as well as another wound and quite a few calluses. Rebecca couldn't figure out when he had noticed all this, but the Duke explained that he was a sword master and that was his skill. Then the girl even jokingly admitted that such hands could not be recognized as the hands of a noble girl, and that her daughter-in-law even scolded her for this. But the Duke did not understand why he should be scolded for such a thing, since it was a sign of hard work, and Rebecca was touched by such words. She could not even hold back a tear, and began to apologize for her incontinence. But Carlisle was not angry at all. On the contrary, he offered her a handkerchief again so that she could put herself in order. The girl thanked him sincerely. In addition, this conversation gave her a lot of confidence and determination. Now she was ready to do anything so that her family could recognize her as a true alchemist. Then the Duke gave her a contract to read, and he could not understand why her dreams were considered childish, since she was so stubbornly striving for it. Then Carlisle decided to share that when he first picked up the sword, the teacher told him that he had never seen a worse stance. Rebecca didn't even believe it, because he was the best swordmaster, but that was thanks to hard training. He suggested to the girl that those who give their best for the sake of the goal, regardless of ridicule, always achieve their goal. So Carlisle was confident that the day would come when her efforts would also be fully rewarded. After a while, the Duke was in the circle of his family, where his younger sister was somewhat surprised by the news. Matushka also did not understand from whom her son could take such an example, making such decisions. She was also sure that her brother, the former emperor, already knew everything about this scheme and had no idea how it would all end. Charlotte, on the contrary, was more worried about the lady, because in the end she would not get anything. She was also worried that after the break in the engagement in 2 years, other nobles might not approach Rebecca with a proposal to marry. Both of them now thought it was too disastrous a proposal for the lady and begged Carlisle to find another way. But the Duke could not do anything because the contract with Lady Oaklane had already been signed and everything was agreed. At the same time, Charlotte noticed that Rebecca was also called an eccentric lady, and this nickname was given to her in high society. But even so, she couldn't understand how this girl dared to agree to such a thing. The sister thought it was some kind of misunderstanding, but the Duke assured them that they would understand everything when they met her in person. At the same time, the mother continued to believe that after such a trick of her son, Rebecca must be very patient. Charlotte agreed with her mother at first, but then she suddenly thought that this girl herself could be deceiving Carlisle. She remembered a time when a lady had disguised herself as a maid in order to get into the Duke's room. Then she gave several more examples when ladies wanted to gain the favor of her brother. But now he was serious and was going to invite Rebecca to dinner in a few days to officially introduce her. And as he left the room with his family, Carlyle thought that this girl was not really like the others. And after a while, the news that the Duke of Ravenstur was going to marry spread all over the area, and many ladies were even dissatisfied. They did not even hesitate to express that they were angry at the fact that only one woman would now get it. But most of all, the ladies were worried that Carlyle's bride would be that strange and eccentric lady. All the girls considered her eccentric and unable to wear dresses. In addition, everyone remembers how she was scolded at the ball for reading a book. Also, the girls did not miss to mention Lady Haley, who always sought to get engaged to the Duke. And now she has even cancelled all the tea parties that she had appointed earlier, referring to the fact that she was sick. Duchess Carcius remained in her room and hardly ever came out, and that evening she only watched the rain in the dark. Her father was worried, and even when he came into her room to find out what was going on, the girl did not even bother to turn to him. She then asked him if he had heard the news that the Duke of Ravenstur was going to marry, not to her, but to Rebecca. She was also worried that out of all the beautiful girls, he decided to choose this particular scary one. Turning to her father, Haley declared that this girl had stolen Carlyle from her, and her face reflected ghostly horror and madness. Old Carcius hastened to calm his daughter, explaining that it was the former emperor who had put pressure on Ravenstur. He also guessed that this was just part of the Duke's plan to buy time until the hatching tradition ended. Haley still couldn't accept it and felt like a laughingstock to the point that she even went crazy about it. Her father admitted that he had spoken to Carlyle's mother, but she also decided to leave the decision to her son. The young Duchess considered Abigail simply ungrateful, recalling that she had once protected Charlotte in high society. The girl insisted that this engagement be broken, but her father could not do anything about it. He also recalled that the Oakleys are very helpful and have been on good terms with them for a long time. Nor would he have been surprised if this Count family had been elevated to the rank of marquises or dukes, since they produce weapons. Haley still believed that without certification, the Oaklanes were worthless, but her father continued to insist that they could not act recklessly. He even offered his daughter to arrange it so that she could become queen in another state, but she did not agree. The young Duchess seemed to be obsessed with Carlyle and did not want to see anyone else as her husband. Her father was also worried that she hadn't recovered from the previous incident, but Haley blamed her father for this, for becoming like this. And now she demanded that old Carcius do everything to get Carlyle to her, and she turned back to the window. At the same time, the girl continued to think angrily about Rebecca, not understanding how she dared to take her fiancé away from her. A few days passed, and Rebecca arrived at the Ravenstur's dinner party, but her tension did not go away. But she tried not to show it, and greeted the mistresses of the estate quite politely. At the same time, two close relatives of the Duke greeted her happily and asked her not to worry. Charlotte also explained that they wanted to see her face at least once before the engagement ceremony and get to know her better. But then Abigail said that Rebecca deserved an apology because she was told that she herself sought this engagement contract. At the same time, the mother understood that in any case, such a deal would be disastrous for her, and she decided to apologize on behalf of her son. Rebecca only stared at the two of them in surprise, not understanding why this deal could be disastrous for her. And when Abigail also asked the girl not to protect her son, she realized that there was some kind of misunderstanding. At the same time, she continued to claim that everything was fine and that she needed this engagement as much as the young Duke. For a moment, Rebecca doubted that his mother and sister approved of it, but they assured her that as long as Carlyle needed it, they had nothing against it. Then the sister approached the future daughter-in-law and asked her to call her simply by her first name without any titles or honors. Charlotte also admitted that her brother only encourages this girl to continue practicing alchemy. Her mother and sister didn't mind it, and Charlotte also asked Rebecca to show them something interesting. Then the girl admitted that she had recently read a book about the magic lighthouse of Maness and noticed that they liked it very much. At this time, Carlyle himself approached them and politely greeted the bride. Then they all took their places together at a table in the garden, where a pleasant conversation continued. And then the Duke said goodbye to Rebecca, and the carriage took her home again. Charlotte and her mother immediately began to discuss how impressed they were with this girl, who was definitely different from the nobles. Mother noticed that Rebecca was polite, but it was also noticeable that she was not used to higher manners. At the same time, my sister was glad that she did not have to be nervous next to this girl, who really turned out to be unusual. And while the ladies continued to discuss Rebecca, Carlyle continued to look at the carriage until it was out of sight. A few more days passed from that evening, and the day of the engagement ceremony came, for which they prepared very carefully. Rebecca arrived at the scene in a luxurious dress that even got tangled in her legs, but she thought about getting engaged today. Everything looked just gorgeous here, because the Rovenster family took care of all the preparations. The girl thought that her daughter-in-law was happy that she had saved money on this, but she also understood that she would only spend it on a new dress. When Charlotte saw her, she was even a little surprised that she was so elegant, and Rebecca admitted that Judith helped her. The Duke's sister appreciated this, but decided that something else would still suit the future relative and dragged the girl with her. Carlyle was also preparing for the party, and the handkerchief around his neck seemed too uncomfortable for him. Soon he was standing at the altar where he had only to wait for his bride-to-be, and he was impatient even himself. But then he noticed the one he had chosen for himself coming down to him, and he did not even expect that she could look so beautiful. Carlyle stared at her so hard that it seemed to him that it was not Rebecca at all, but some other girl. Then he sincerely expressed his compliment to her, which even made her a little embarrassed. Rebecca also admitted that this time she was dressed up by Charlotte, and that she herself likes that her image was liked by the groom. At the same time, the girl remembered how she did not recognize herself in the mirror, how much she now differed from her image. At the same time, she remembered how beautiful her mother was, and now it even seemed to her that this new image reminded her. Rebecca also wondered if her mother would have supported such a decision if she had been alive at that moment. And she was distracted from her thoughts by the Duke, who kissed her hand as a sign of respect and appreciation, as a true lady. At first, Rebecca was even somewhat surprised by such an act, but she could not object to this in a word. At this time, Charlotte stood a little to the side and watched them all the time, while being a little nervous. She was quite surprised that her brother kissed Rebecca's hand, because she knew him very well and he usually doesn't do that. Carlyle was surprised at this time and afterwards as if he had been hypnotized, but it did not upset him. Lady Oaklane herself later thought that this was a common thing for Carlyle, because he had always been popular with girls. After that, they decided that it was time to go to the others, because everyone was already waiting for the ceremony to begin. Rebecca took his arm as she should, but because she was still nervous, she inadvertently squeezed his arm very hard. Among the guests, Hames Oaklane felt a little disappointed that only close relatives were invited. But at the same time, he also found this engagement ceremony truly miraculous, and the way the Rovensters had prepared for it. Most of all, Hames was still happy with the way his daughter looked, and that she would become a duchess in the future. At the same time, William reminded his father that the Duke's promised to make the wedding itself even more grandiose. At this time, the beginning of the ceremony began to be announced, and all the guests at once fell silent to hear the vows of the bride and groom. Some ladies still looked disapprovingly at Rebecca, and her father wished that her mother-in-law would take good care of her from now on. Abigail did not argue, because he gave them his precious daughter, and she would make sure that she felt completely comfortable. And when the main ceremony was over, everyone began to congratulate the newlyweds, shouting different wishes at the same time. Rebecca then noticed that her brother was approaching her, who also congratulated her, and also asked her for forgiveness for what had happened in the workshop. But the girl in her heart did not believe in his sincerity, and at the same time she was not going to feel guilty either. At the same time, she remembered how Locke approached her after that incident and gave her a folder with her data, which he had secretly hidden. The girl was grateful to him for this, but he still felt guilty for not being able to stop William. He also admitted that in fact he always thought of her as an amazing alchemist and asked her not to give up. For this act and for his faith in her, Rebecca was very grateful to him and decided that she would never forget it. Then the girl saw Judith approaching her, thinking that it was all thanks to her, and asked her relative not to forget it. And only her father, who remained standing aside for now, came up and gave her his congratulations. The girl was grateful to her father, and he, in turn, expressed the hope that the Duke would protect her well. Carlyle had promised that he would do anything for it, and when Hames walked away, he remembered something else. The Duke leaned over to his fiancée and decided to confess that the workshop of which he had spoken earlier was now completely ready. Rebecca was completely delighted. She could not believe that now she had her own workshop. Carlyle also assured that she will never regret agreeing to sign this contract. After the ceremony, the girl went to her new home, which was located in the Duke's estate. At that moment, Rosalind's maid was cleaning there, but since Rebecca was wandering back and forth from nerves, it made her work difficult. The maid asked her mistress to pause for a short time, but she could not calm down as the Duke was late. Rosalind explained that there was no need to worry so much about this, and that everything was different in this estate. Then she pointed out that everything here is furnished only with the most beautiful and high-quality things. The maid, admiring all this, did not even hesitate to compare this estate with the imperial palace. At that moment, The Duke himself knocked on the door, who immediately asked if Rebecca liked the room. The girl really admired her new room because everything here sparkled as if in a fairy tale. Carlyle smiled as he did so and found himself always smiling with Rebecca, something he hadn't usually done in the past. He also apologized for making her wait so long, and then asked her to come with him so he could show her around the workshop. The girl had thought it would be a small room, as the Duke had called it an annex, but when they approached, she was pleasantly shocked again. In fact, she was now standing in front of a building that looked more like a small mansion. Carlyle also added that he left the exterior decoration the same, and renovated only one of the rooms. However, the girl's eyes were again significantly rounded and sparkled with surprise because there was so much inside. In addition, everything was literally sparkling there too, and the Duke was pleased that he was able to please with such a gift. Then the girl went to the lockers to take a closer look at everything and noticed that there was a lot of everything that was necessary for work. Carlyle commented that he had made sure to equip the place with only high-quality products. And looking at all this, Rebecca was now beginning to understand why all the other ladies were so obsessed with the Duke. Rosalind, who had quietly followed them, saw her mistress admiring and did not know how her master knew what she preferred. The maid also noticed how happy Rebecca was, that she even began to fear that she might go crazy with happiness. The next morning, as soon as she opened her eyes, she saw an unfamiliar ceiling, but then she remembered that she was now living with the Rovensters. The bed was also very soft, and she slept like a dead woman, although before that she thought that she would not be able to sleep in an unfamiliar environment. Rebecca also noticed that she woke up too early, but then realized that now she didn't have to wait for the workshop to open. The girl immediately rushed there, but Rosalind managed to stop her in time, noticing that she was rushing in her nightgown. And then she provided the mistress with her new work clothes, hoping that she guessed the size exactly. Rebecca, seeing this shape, could not stop admiring again because it was not only cute but also soft to the touch. Also, the girl really liked that there were a lot of pockets, and she immediately went to change clothes. She didn't even want to stay for breakfast, and Rosalind thought she needed someone who could stop such madness. Meanwhile, Rebecca was already rushing down the corridor, and there she met the Duke, whom she was also glad to see. He, in turn, politely greeted his fiancée, and she only cheerfully chirped to him in return and hurried on. Still, she explained to Carlyle that she was in a hurry to go to the workshop, and then she hurried on her way again. The Duke could see how pleased she was, and he liked that she liked everything here, but he was also a little disappointed. Soon, Rebecca was opening the door to her workshop again, and she couldn't believe it was all hers. After a while, Abigail Rovenster was busy with some business, and also asked the maid how her daughter-in-law was. The maid reported that she spent most of her time in the workshop, but she wasn't quite sure about it. The Duchess found it a little strange that Rebecca spent so much time like this and almost never even went out. Then she decided to call Rosalind to her, hoping that she would be able to reveal more details to her. Abigail also understood that this maid might be scared after moving into their estate and assured that she had nothing to fear. The Duchess wanted the maid to be as comfortable as her daughter-in-law, and she suddenly spoke in fright. Rosalind almost begged her mistress to help stop her mistress because she was really carried away. Soon they all went together to the workshop, where the maid informed Rebecca of the Duchess's arrival. But she was very carried away by her experiments that it seemed that she did not even hear anyone around. As she did so, she kept muttering to herself, and when Rosalind couldn't call her, Abigail decided to intervene. She approached her daughter-in-law and called out to her very loudly, from which she even jumped on the spot. Now the Duchess understood why this maid asked her for help, because Rebecca had literally renounced the rest of the world. She also decided to take some action, but first she thought that it would be enough to reprimand her daughter-in-law for such behavior. The Duchess notified her that Carlyle, who had ascended beyond human capabilities, was also worried about her. Hatem Abigail pointed out to the girl's appearance that her face had lost a lot of weight, and her mother would have been very upset about this. Rebecca thought she knew something about her mother, and the Duchess confirmed it without hesitation. But then she returned to the previous topic again and reminded that even if the engagement is under a contract, the girl still remains the bride of her son. Therefore, Abigail will consider her his man and family member until the day the contract ends. At the same time, she was not going to allow the girl to behave as if this family was being neglected. The Duchess also ordered Rosalind to report to the head maid immediately if Rebecca missed dinner again or was awake. And also in this case, she will have to pull her daughter-in-law out of the workshop no matter what it costs her. Rebecca immediately pleaded, explaining that she really needed to work a little longer. But the Duchess continued to stand her ground and warned that if she was stubborn, she would forbid her to enter the workshop. Rebecca was perplexed by this, and Rosalind at this time began to pull her away so that she could eat and also sleep a little. Looking at all this, Abigail was convinced that this girl's thoughts were occupied only with alchemy. At the same time, she remembered her son, who also neglected himself when he was training. The Duchess also understood that there was probably no way to convince such determined people otherwise. At the meal, Rebecca was joined by Carlyle, who admitted that his sister had told him everything. The girl herself admitted that Mrs. Abigail scolded her for this and insisted that she should eat. The Duke offered to talk about this with her mother, but the girl understood that she did so out of good intentions. In addition, the Duchess at this moment reminded Rebecca of her own mother. And she even had such pleasant care. Carlyle then admitted that he had visited her for a reason, and that he had brought her an invitation to the Crown Prince's birthday. Soon this significant day came, and the girls at the ball, as usual, discussed mainly the Duke's bride. They were impatient to see a face that so rarely appeared in public, and that she usually declined such invitations. At the same time, the ladies noticed that Rebecca was called an eccentric lady for a reason, and believed that she now had a very high opinion of herself. And while the girls were chatting, they announced the arrival of the Duke and his fiancée, and everyone immediately turned their eyes in that direction. Rebecca was still timidly walking in a new outfit, which this time was also distinguished by unusual beauty. And in this image, this girl was even unrecognizable, and many ladies could not believe that it was really her. The ducal couple approached the Crown Prince, and Carlyle and his bride expressed their sincere congratulations to him. This Crown Prince was still very young and could hardly sit straight on the throne, but at the same time he also politely thanked them. Emperor Oberith congratulated the couple on their engagement, and they thanked him in return. Before that, Abigail asked Rebecca not to say anything superfluous, because she did not want to make a single mistake today. The Duke then apologized to the ruler, as the former emperor was already waiting for him. Oberith looked after the departing couple and noticed that together they looked even better than he expected. On the way, the girl thought about it, and Carlyle decided to ask how she felt. At the same time, he spoke in a whisper, from which she even shuddered, but then assured that everything was fine with her. Still, the Duke did not cease to worry, and the girl then asked him not to interrogate her so much. And then she explained to him that she tried to say only what was necessary and nothing superfluous, so as not to make mistakes. At the same time, Rebecca admitted that Charlotte and Madame Abigail helped her choose the dress that she is wearing now. And when she tried to explain to them how much she liked it with the help of a metaphor, they only laughed. Carlyle asked the bride to ignore this, and was sure that they were giving their compliments. Then Rebecca admitted that if she made a mistake today, it could reflect badly on his family. So she kept quiet. Carlyle realized that the girl was worried and asked her not to worry, and then suggested that she come back later as they had planned. After that, they came to the corner of the hall where the old emperor was, who also immediately congratulated them on their engagement. At the same time, he asked if they liked his gift, but the girl did not quite understand what he meant. Then the Duke whispered to her that the emperor had given them a villa in the south, and Rebecca could not believe that he had told her so just now. Still, she politely thanked His Majesty for the gift, while he asked the Duke to bring him a glass of wine. Carlyle realized that he wanted to talk to his fiancée in private, and he did not resist. And when he left, the emperor invited the girl to talk in the garden, hinting that the room was quite stuffy. Rebecca did not object to his request, and the girls who stood aside only began to grumble in her direction. And when they found themselves on the street, the emperor first of all decided to ask what kind of relationship she had with the Duke. At the same time, he admitted that he was aware that all this was just a performance, but assured that she should not worry. The emperor had actually expected Carlyle to come up with something like that to get out of the situation, but he also did not expect that it was Rebecca who decided to take part in this, and this surprised him the most. This also raised a few more questions from him, and he wondered if they had known each other before. Rebecca honestly admitted that they had never seen each other before, since she had never taken part in social events. And their first meeting was on the day when she went to see the Duke, after receiving a letter from him. The emperor also found this strange, because he noticed that the Duke liked this girl very much, and that he was literally in love with her. He then confessed to Rebecca that he had never seen the Duke stare at her for so long, nor had he smiled so comfortably. After that, he assumed that this couple were really in love, but Rebecca immediately began to protest that this was not the case. The emperor accepted her explanation, but hoped that as long as they were together, she would take good care of the Duke. At that moment, Carlyle appeared beside them, who asked His Majesty not to pester his fiancée anymore. The old man in the expensive cloak only asked why he had been going to buy wine for so long. The Duke reported that he had to find the wine that the Emperor loved and always drank so much. The former ruler took his glass and left the couple to enjoy the evening, but as he moved on, he stole another glance at them. It really seemed to him that Carlyle's hitherto cold heart would finally blossom. At this time, the Duke asked the bride what His Majesty was interrogating her about, but she did not dare to answer. Still, she admitted that he realized that their entire engagement was just a pretense. Carlyle didn't bother her with any more answers, and soon they were dancing to the pleasant music in the hall. But the Duke was still haunted, and he decided to resume the conversation, and the girl was worried that the Emperor would be able to break off this engagement. Carlyle told Rebecca not to worry about it because he had already expected this, and the girl was even more worried. But the Duke assured her that it was actually all right and she didn't need to worry. Then he noticed that everyone was looking at them like a pack of hungry wolves, and the girl decided that it was because she was not dancing well. Rebecca also felt that people were ready to pounce on them as soon as the dance was over. But the Duke assured her that she had nothing to fear, and he was ready to protect her at all costs under any circumstances. This calmed Rebecca down, and she continued to dance with him, smiling now. But suddenly she decided to leave Carlyle and immediately slipped away from him, rushing quickly to the exit. The other girls immediately swooped down on him, who began to beg him to pay attention to them. At this time, Rebecca found an empty room for herself, where she wanted to take a break from the event. But even then, she was found by other girls who wanted to talk to her. However, it was clear that the conversation would not be in pleasant tones. One of the ladies even encouraged Rebecca to read a book here again, but Rebecca assured her that she could no longer do so. Then she proudly declared that she was now the Duke's fiancée, as Charlotte had previously advised her to do so. But the girl who came in only hissed that she refused to accept someone like herself as his lordship's bride. She also did not believe that Rebecca really deserved such a title, and this made her very angry. In response, Rebecca again stated that it was up to Carlyle and herself to decide, and that she didn't care about their acceptance. The girl who entered was even more infuriated that this bride called the Duke by his first name, and then Lady Haley appeared behind her. With some criticism, she noticed that the hall seemed empty, since all her friends had gathered in this place. They reported that they only wanted to talk to Rebecca, but she did not understand what they could talk about. Haley accepted their report with a smile and then asked to be left alone with this girl to talk. When they left, Rebecca even swallowed the lump in her throat with difficulty, as the Duchess's gaze seemed very unfriendly. But she began with pleasantries, admitting that she had long wanted to meet the Duke's fiancé. Rebecca remembered Charlotte's words that this lady should be feared because she was simply obsessed with her brother and fixated on him. At this time, Haley, almost without blinking, approached the girl and decided to give her one useful advice. Rebecca immediately began to expect some nasty things from her, and she really advised to cancel the engagement. The girl still plucked up the courage and began to object, because she saw no reason to cancel everything. But Haley only called her the stupidest creature she'd ever seen, since she didn't understand anything. Rebecca considered the Duchess rude, but she again stated that she was not rude here, because this girl took what she had no right to. Then, leaning over, Haley whispered that Carlyle had always belonged to her alone and no one else. But Rebecca again stated that the Duke was not a property that could be owned, and that it was up to him to decide. Also, the girl later admitted that she was not at all afraid of the young Duchess, which made her perplexed. The bride was sure that Haley could not do anything, so she decided to come with her stupid advice. Rebecca also stated that the Duchess could do all she could do was wait until she left Carlyle herself. At the same time, she wondered if Haley really loved the Duke or if she just wanted to own him as if he were some kind of thing. The Duchess was already visibly angry and declared that it didn't matter and she would do anything to get it. At the same time, she grabbed Rebecca by the shoulder and again began to advise him to leave him until she regretted it. But then her hand was pushed away very strongly by Charlotte, who appeared at the most opportune moment. Rebecca was even surprised by such a sudden appearance, and Haley, on the contrary, only got angrier. She then began to remind her why Charlotte still remained among the nobles, calling her ungrateful. But she was convinced that Haley had only helped her at the time to win her brother's favor. The Duchess hinted that she could arrange for Charlotte to be mocked again as a widow who did not even have a wedding night. However, she did not care. She decided to leave this evil girl and dragged Rebecca with her. They continued running for a while until they stopped in the garden, and the Duke's fiancé noticed that Charlotte was very upset. She admitted that she was once really married to the son of the Marquis, who has now renounced his title. This Marquis decided to retire to the country, and she herself was left a widow on the first night. Charlotte said that after the wedding ceremony, an accident occurred. That day they were very tired and planned to rest, but suddenly an assassin burst into the room, targeting her husband. She also assumed that this killer wanted her brother to pursue him, so he didn't touch her. But at the same time, the Marquis had a lot of enemies, although he was not a bad person in himself. Only because of his ambitions, he feuded with many houses in order to gain more power. But after that night, the Marquis also did not want to let Charlotte go, and her family had to sue to annul the marriage. The court, of course, was won, but from that time on, their families began to feud, and the Marquis left the capital with a grudge against her. He couldn't accept that his son was dead and she was alive, and Rebecca, hearing this, assured that she was not to blame. Charlotte agreed with her, but she still couldn't stop people from calling her a widow. She also remembered how her brother had comforted her, believing that once she recovered, she would be able to marry someone else. He also suggested that she not marry again if she didn't want to, and he would take care of her anyway. But Charlotte didn't want to burden her brother. She just wanted to be good at something, since Rebecca is now. Then the daughter-in-law suggested that she leave here and return home, because they did not have to stay. For the next few days, their lives were no different. But one day, Charlotte decided to take a walk in the garden. Trying to have fun in the fresh air, she was completely immersed in thought, but then she heard a rustle not far from her. As she walked in that direction to check, she saw Rebecca hanging from a tree, holding onto a branch with her hands and feet. Charlotte was very afraid for her that she might fall, but the girl deftly turned and then jumped off. Then the Duke's sister began to wonder what her daughter-in-law was doing there, and she handed her a small ball with golden wings. Rebecca explained that it is a weapon-type magic tool that should fly and attack enemies on its own. But so far, no matter how hard she tried, she hadn't been able to make him fly, at least not in the right direction. This time, the balloon caught on a branch in flight, so Rebecca had to climb there to get it. At the same time, Charlotte still could not understand how her daughter-in-law managed to climb there because the tree is quite tall. She explained that skilled alchemists must be able to go anywhere to gather the necessary materials. She also admitted that for this she completed special courses in basic strength training. And then she also let it slip that she had persuaded her father to let her learn to swim and climb. But then Rebecca realized that she had stirred up too much and asked not to tell anyone about it, and also that she had climbed a tree. The girl was afraid that she would be scolded for this, and Charlotte promised that she would keep her secret, and then invited her to tea in the greenhouse. Rebecca had never been there before, and the Duke's sister explained that this was the pride of the Rovenster family. Not only is it huge, all the previous duchesses have taken care of this greenhouse, and now Charlotte has decided to show it to Rebecca. At the entrance, they saw Mrs. Abigail's maid, and it became clear that the duchess was just now resting there. Her sister decided that it was worth coming here next time, but Rebecca suggested that we drink tea with her mistress. Then Charlotte remembered that there was one rule that had to be followed in their house. Abigail was not quite healthy and did not want to show her condition, so sometimes she comes here to relax alone. At this time, too, no one should disturb the Duchess's vacation in the greenhouse, whatever the reason. Rebecca understood her, and her sister, continuing to explain the rest, went back, while her daughter-in-law lingered. She looked in the direction of the greenhouse as if something was attracting her gaze, but for now everything seemed absolutely calm. And suddenly there was an explosion near one of the gazebos, and Rebecca was very frightened, thinking that this could happen because of her experiments. She immediately began to run, not knowing what to do, realizing that she was in trouble, and promised herself never to make weapons again. The girl also remembered how shortly before Carlisle was going to go to the northern border. Monsters continued to attack there until that time, and he had to settle everything there. But he was not going to stay too long. At the same time, he asked his bride to look after the estate until he was gone, and she promised that there would be no problems. And now she couldn't believe that she had made such a mess herself, but nevertheless she decided to try to fix it. And when she ran to the scene, she saw the Duchess standing without hair and holding a golden ball with wings on her hand. Dark smoke continued to flow from the balloon, and Rebecca's breath caught in her throat, and she did not know what to say in defense. But catching the moment when she was able to say something, the girl only shouted to the Duchess that she was very sorry and then ran away. Abigail saw what a guilty face her daughter-in-law had, and realized that the trouble happened because of her. The next morning, the Duchess woke up in a better condition than the day before, and began to preen herself in front of the mirror. As usual, she was helped by a maid, and today Abigail asked for help to put on the lightest wig. At the same time, the Duchess thought to engage in the production of wigs, so that they would not be so heavy and uncomfortable. The maid reminded that all wigs are made of real human hair, but the mistress considered this to be the only positive quality. Abigail then asked that Rebecca be brought to her, as she needed to discuss what had happened the day before. At this point, the maid stammered and admitted that this girl herself was already waiting to be accepted. and also that Rebecca wanted to give something to the Duchess, so she waited for her to wake up. Abigail was a little surprised, but still went to meet her daughter-in-law, and she, seeing the mistress, was even more worried. But first of all, the girl apologized for disturbing her so early. The Duchess assured that everything was fine, because she would find out about it someday anyway, so there was no need to be so nervous. She also admitted that a few years ago she had heart problems, but by now the disease has completely disappeared. But in doing so, she lost her hair, but her reputation needs to be maintained, and she has to wear wigs. Also, for this reason, the Duchess has not attended social events for some time, but now she did not want to talk about this. Abigail did not really like the experiments that her daughter-in-law conducted, and she, in turn, decided to give her something. Rebecca then handed the Duchess the vial, hoping that she would accept it as a sign of recognition and reconciliation. The mistress decided at first that it was some kind of medicine, and the girl confirmed that it was a potion for hair growth. In this way, Rebecca also wanted to apologize for what had happened the day before, so she created it. The Duchess could not even believe that such a thing could exist, but her daughter-in-law assured that it was true. Then she admitted that at first she worked on an ointment for scars, but in the end it turned out. She has also already tested the product and assured that it works, and there are practically no side effects. Seeing how doubtful Abigail was, the girl decided to take it back, but she, on the contrary, began to ask how it should be used. Rebecca explained that the product must be applied to the skin, and the maid, hearing this, immediately ran to prepare everything that was necessary for this. Then the girl also decided to warn that after application, the hair may grow even longer than expected. A minute later, the maid returned with everything ready and she called her mistress. But Abigail decided to ask her daughter-in-law to smear her scalp herself, and she readily agreed. After a few massaging movements, Rebecca asked what the Duchess was feeling, and she honestly admitted that it was as if something sticky had been smeared on her head, but she was glad that it could also be washed off soon. Abigail was also very worried, because she was well aware that there was no potion for hair growth. But when Rebecca finished, the Duchess could not believe her eyes because now she had beautiful hair. Even the maid was very surprised at such a miracle and began to intently examine the hair. And Abigail thought that this was not even a miraculous potion, but the girl herself was just a miracle. In the late afternoon, Carlyle returned to the manor, and the butler decided to prepare everything for him to rest with. But he was in no hurry to rest yet, while believing that the others had already gone to their rooms. The butler then informed him that his mother was still awake in the drawing room, and the Duke decided to go to her at once. Knocking and entering, he immediately reported that he had already returned, and noticed that the Duchess was in good spirits. He also couldn't help but notice her hair, which was now blonde, and decided that she had just dyed it. But in response, Abigail only stated that Rebecca is really an amazing girl. The Duchess was in no hurry to explain what exactly her daughter-in-law had done, but she called it absolutely incredible. The next day, she met Rebecca again and thanked her for giving her her life back. The girl immediately became modest and also added that the effect of this potion lasts about 10 days. Abigail was simply amazed because it was even longer than she actually expected. At the same time, Rebecca promised to take more medication before this portion runs out and that the Duchess does not need to worry. After that, the Duchess also admitted that she and her brother were very sorry that Hames Oakleigh had left, because he was also a great alchemist. But at the same time, she also saw the good, because instead of him, now his daughter turned out to be as magnificent as her father. The Duchess also couldn't understand why their talents were still unknown to the world. At the same time, the girl continued to be embarrassed, thinking that she did not deserve such praise after a failed project. But Abigail disagreed. She believed that her daughter-in-law had created something amazing, and it was the best potion she had ever seen. Rebecca still thought that from an alchemical point of view, it was a rather trivial thing that would not last long. The Duchess, in turn, continued to disagree with her, and believed that she criticized herself too much. It's just that the girl has always been told that her creations are useless, and Abigail said that only fools could say that. At the same time, she added that the girl's father will still always keep the bar high, being a genius. However, it was Rebecca who had done something incredible, and for the Duchess it was not just a potion, but a dream potion. She still couldn't compare it to a weapon or a philosopher's stone, but Abigail clarified something. For alchemists, there was their own concept of the significance of the product, but its values were somewhat different, so for the Duchess, this is a masterpiece. At the same time, she pointed out that it would be natural for a general to want more weapons, and a poor man who does not even have money for food will desire for himself the philosopher's stone, which turns anything into gold. Abigail herself didn't need either, and the only thing she ever wanted was to get her hair back. For this reason, this potion is the most valuable and useful product in the world for her. Also, the Duchess was sure that everyone else would agree with her on this, and Rebecca was simply moved. At this time, the Duke, who had also been sitting at the table with his sister, decided to intervene, but did not interfere with the conversation. Charlotte even thought that her mother and sister-in-law had forgotten about them, and Abigail immediately suggested that they start breakfast. But her daughter only said with resentment that the Duchess should have told them that her illness was completely gone. Carlisle also wondered why she was hiding it, adding that they were very worried about her. The Duchess explained that it was for their own sake, because people would surely mock them if they found out that she was bald. Only Charlotte did not care at all. On the contrary, she was afraid that her mother might fall again. Abigail then apologized and also stated that she wanted to discuss today that Rebecca had created an incredible thing. Turning to her daughter-in-law, she informed everyone that she had created a very good potion and briefly told about its properties. She then suggested that immediately after breakfast, we should discuss a business plan for the commercialization of this potion. The girl even shuddered at the Duchess's words because she did not think at all to trade this product. Carlisle did not immediately understand everything and asked his mother to explain in more detail what she had already planned. The lady simply decided that she should not be the only one who knew about the miraculous properties of such a medicine. At the same time, she hoped that the others would support her, and once again repeated her offer to release the potion to the market. Abigail was ready to guarantee that there would be a very high demand for it, although the girl herself doubted this. But the Duchess continued to assure that this potion would change the lives of many people on this continent. At the same time, Charlotte agreed that people would be ready to pay any price for him. She also asked Rebecca to call her simply Ball, because now they are not only future relatives but also friends. She then continued that for a potion that helped restore a bald man's hair, everyone would even be willing to kill. Rebecca was worried again, and the Duchess continued to praise her making. Above all, Abigail believed that such a product should definitely go down in history. The girl did not know what to say and asked the Duke if he thought so too. But Carlisle wondered why Rebecca thought she would keep such a useful medicine. Then they all began to persuade the girl that she should sell this potion and not keep it a secret. Charlotte noted that the Oaklane's workshop would not be enough for this and suggested considering other options. At the same time, she knew that if they trusted the trading company or guild to do so, they would require a large contribution. However, in the long run, it would be quite a good option. And then the sister wondered if there were any other potions. Rebecca wasn't sure if any of her products were worth the sale, but the Duchess and her daughter decided that they would inspect everything themselves and make a decision. A few days after that, the Duchess approached the alchemist girl and decided to introduce someone to her. With her came their family lawyer named Tyler, who was also Lord Largo's second son. Abigail also assured that this young man would take care of all the legal problems that arose when creating a business. In addition, another person named Olsen came with them who will run their company. Rebecca politely greeted everyone and they began to praise her magnificent potion. Olsen admitted that he had also lost his hair, and now he just couldn't believe that such a potion existed. Then he asked what the name of the brew was, but Rebecca hadn't given it a name yet. The Duchess at this time suggested calling this hair growth product Rebecca, and her guests supported her suggestion. However, Rebecca herself was still hesitant to sell the potion, and Abigail showed her support. She also promised to tell everyone that she was able to restore her hair after a serious illness. The Duchess also intended to return to high society, because now she would need to participate in many more events. At the same time, any action of Abigail will be an excellent advertisement for the hair restorer. Rebecca thought her future mother-in-law was simply amazing, but she, on the contrary, insisted that it was her daughter-in-law who was like that. Then the Duchess turned to the guests and offered to discuss the list of proposed workshops for the manufacture of goods. After a while, Rebecca was sitting in her workshop again, and her fiancé decided to visit her. The girl was even surprised that he decided to visit her at such a late hour, and he reminded her that they had not exchanged greetings today. Rebecca immediately apologized for missing this moment. She was just very busy, but ready to fix it. Carlisle didn't hold a grudge against her, because he knew she was working on the greatest invention of their time. The girl also invited him to sit down, finding the cleanest place for him that was there. She also sat down opposite him, and for about a minute, silence reigned around them. Then Rebecca greeted her fiancé in a polite tone on his return and asked if he was injured. The girl understood that tracking monsters was not an easy task, but the Duke assured that everything was fine with him. But then he decided to change the topic of conversation, and now he thanked his fiancé, which surprised her greatly. Carlisle was grateful that she had restored his mother's freedom, and if it hadn't been for her, he wouldn't have known that his mother was much better. The Duke also admitted that he had always been afraid, but was aware that his mother did not understand what her children had been through. Now the young man only saw how delighted she was with the fact that a new business was planned. Rebecca doubted that everything was all right, and Carlyle asked her to clarify what she meant. The girl admitted that she was worried that she could tarnish the reputation of the Ravensters. She was also embarrassed that when people found out that she was still practicing alchemy, they would start calling her strange again. Then the Duke leaned closer to her and assured her that she should not worry about it at all. He explained that if people call her eccentric, it is only because they envy her wonderful invention. But Carlyle also assured that if these people are annoying, then he can always solve the issue in a different way. To this, the girl immediately shouted that it was not worth doing anything like this, and the Duke was also worried about her family. Carlyle wondered if she cared if her family found out, and she was a little confused. Rebecca had a pretty good idea of what her father and brother would say, and the Duke had promised that he and her mother would protect her. After that, Carlyle also expressed his confidence that she would definitely succeed, but even if she wasn't, it didn't matter to him. He explained that he would simply always support her alchemical endeavor, as he had promised earlier. Suddenly, the girl noticed a crack and immediately rushed at the Duke to push him away, and a moment later, there was a small explosion in the workshop. Carlyle's stance and balance were still quite strong, and he remained standing where he was, and the girl was in his arms. The explosion was not significant, but now Rebecca needed more materials, and she and the Duke went to Mr. Bishop's. He immediately began to greet the future Duchess with respect as soon as she crossed the threshold. But the girl objected because she was still only a bride and asked an old acquaintance to call her as before. She also recalled that Bishop's is friends with her father, who is formerly a count. At the same time, Bishop's always dreamed that people would treat Himes as an alchemist and not as a nobleman. But still, after that, he admitted that he could not believe it when he received an offer from the Ravenster family. And also that Rebecca continues to practice alchemy, even while living with the Duke of Ravenster. The girl assured her that everything was fine and that Carlyle and his mother supported her in every possible way. Bishop's thought this was wonderful, because he would sincerely regret if her talents were wasted. Rebecca noticed that the old man had changed a little in his views, and he decided that it was better to keep up with the times. He also admitted that by this time he had completely finished developing magical weapons. The girl heard about this, as well as that he decided to convert his workshop for a personal business. Bishop simply accepted that alchemy in its current form had reached a dead end, and everyone was investing only in magical weapons. At the same time, he noted that they missed many great opportunities in which to show their talents. The old man was sorry that he hadn't realized this sooner, and by then his workshop was already mired in debt. And now he can only use it to get orders to somehow make ends meet. Bishop's hoped to pay off all his debts before he died because he wanted his son to get the workshop. Rebecca could help him with this and asked if he could produce her potion for hair growth. The old man was pleased, but he did not even think that friendship with her father would help him so much. Rebecca assured that the potion works, but a few more safety tests need to be done before selling. The girl also asked not to say anything to her father for the time being, and Bishop's realized that he, having found out, would be able to make an unnecessary noise. He then promised that he would keep it a secret from Himes, while rejoicing that his workshop now had a bright future. The old man also decided to submit a few ideas on his own, which seemed to Rebecca simply brilliant. The girl hoped that when everything worked out and everyone was successful in this business, her father and brother would finally recognize her as an alchemist. She had always wanted to help people with the help of alchemy, but at the same time, she remembered the Duke's words that it did not matter to him how everything turned out. Thinking of this, Rebecca even blushed, and Bishop's was worried about her condition, but she immediately calmed him down. It's just that she also remembered the time when she clumsily fell on top of the Duke, and she was very ashamed of it. She then just quickly escorted Carlyle out before he noticed her embarrassment, but knew he probably didn't care. After a while, Madame Abigail received an invitation to a tea party, and the other aristocrats were very happy to see her. But at the same time, they were still surprised by her, because they thought that she would never come to them again. At the same time, the Marquise Rimadour never forgot about the Duchess and did not stop sending her invitations, which she was very happy about. Abigail thanked the Marquise this time, but she, on the contrary, assured that the Duchess had done much more for her. The lady noticed that she really hadn't been to the events for a long time, and decided to announce that she was ready to return to high society. The women began to applaud her with admiration and even offered to thank the Artel for the return of the Duchess. But that wasn't all Abigail wanted to share with them, and she believed that others should know about it as well. Then she recalled that she had previously left high society because she had a bad heart. But over time her illness passed, but she lost her hair due to the side effects of the drugs. The aristocrats were even horrified by this and decided to advise that it would be better to keep it a secret. But the Duchess asked them not to worry because her hair had already grown back, although before that it had fallen out completely. Then she put a bottle of potion on the table and explained that her son's fiancé had created a miraculous remedy. From this product, Abigail's hair grew back, while it looked even a little better than before. In addition, there are no side effects and this potion does not need to be taken orally but only smeared, which is much more convenient. The aristocrats were simply delighted, and each began to think for her bald relative that this ointment would help them too. Then they began to ask the Duchess to persuade her daughter-in-law to share the potion with them as well. She only smiled in response because she did not come to them empty-handed and ask the maid to distribute a bottle to the women. She also instructed them and explained that the effect lasts 10 days, after which it can be repeated if desired. Abigail also admitted that such a product can be bought, because today the Rovenster store will open on the main street. Then she pointedly advertised Rebecca's hair growth product and hoped that they would never miss the opening. And at the appointed time, people who had already heard well about the potion literally knocked each other off their feet just to be the first. Everyone grabbed this remedy for himself, and very soon all the goods were already sold out, from which the crowd began to make noise. The clerk shouted at them that they only needed to wait a little longer, and soon this potion would appear on the shelves again. Buyers still did not back down and asked to at least reserve a bottle for them, so that they would not miss the opportunity to buy again. Some did not believe that there was nothing left at all and offered quite large sums to get a bottle. At this time, Charlotte was standing not far from the crowd, admiring the success, thinking that they had hit the jackpot. Then she decided to visit the Duchess, who had just returned herself and was also going to meet her daughter. Abigail explained that she was going to the Rovenster store and asked her to join. Charlotte noticed that her mother was not yet aware of what was happening, and immediately explained that people were about to start rioting over this potion. The Duchess did not understand why people decided to do this because they were crazy about him. At that moment, the butler brought the lady a message from Mr. Olson, and she immediately read that the whole product had been sold out in an hour. With this news, Charlotte also went to Rebecca to please her with a successful first sale. The girl could not believe it, and her sister repeated again that there was not a single bottle left, of which there were 700 in all. Now Charlotte was even happier than Rebecca herself, and also asked if her daughter-in-law had signed a contract with her mother. She confirmed that they would divide the profits 50-50, but her sister decided that this was too much. Rebecca agreed that she wanted at least 40% for herself, but Charlotte said that she should take at least 70%. The daughter-in-law was embarrassed, and the sister realized that she did not have any qualities to be a good businesswoman. But then she said that after some time this money would be hers in any case, since she would marry her brother. Now Rebecca was frightened, because she definitely hadn't prepared for this, and she began to mumble under her breath, trying to find the right thought. After a while, Carlyle visited his mother and noticed that there were a lot of gifts and jewelry in her living room. At first he thought they were offerings from the nobles, and reminded her that he had promised to send them to the goddess Artel in return. Abigail hastened to reassure him that this was not for him, and when Rebecca entered the room, she realized that these were gifts for her. But he did not scold her, but on the contrary, congratulated her on the first successful sale and advised her to celebrate it. The girl did not mind, but she wondered what to do with the gifts, and Carlyle joked that she could just get rid of them. Then Charlotte intervened, who explained that it was impossible to do this, because there were invitations for her. She was even surprised, because she had previously been discriminated against for being a widow, and the Duke offered to arrange a private party. With that, Carlyle decided to say goodbye to them, as he still had a lot to do, and wished his fiancée good luck. At the same time, Rebecca noticed that this was the first time they had met since she had fallen into his arms. Now the girl was sure that Carlyle hadn't thought anything bad of her then, and she was only unnecessarily nervous. While the Duke was heading down the corridor, several young men suddenly jumped out to meet him, and each of them asked that his lordship give him a moment of attention, considering his question more important than the others. Carlyle asked them not to argue, but to explain calmly what had happened, and one of the Marquis immediately confided his sadness. Tom managed to buy only one bottle of hair growth product, and the store does not know when the next batch will be. At this time, another guy pushed him and began to cry that he could not get married because of the fact that his hair was falling out. And then the guys began to almost fight among themselves again trying to speak out and shouting various reasons. At this time, the Duke began to laugh, which caused the guys to stop, and he clarified that he hadn't expected such a stir. But they only began to ask him now to help them get potions, for he was the fiancé of the girl who brewed it. At this time, one of the soldiers also approached and notified the Duke that everyone was ready for training, which he was happy about. Promising that he would talk to these people later, Carlyle hurried even ahead of the soldier, just to escape from these customers. Catching up with the master, the soldier noticed that he had also been in a good mood lately. The Duke simply remembered how serious his family was about this business, and now it has even begun to go beyond the limits. Late in the afternoon at Rebecca's home, Judith returned and asked the servant where his lordship was. He reported that he was now in his office, and the girl immediately went there. On the way, she bumped into Locke, and was even frightened by the surprise, and he began to ask where she was. Judith explained that she had been to a reception in the garden, and then she knew from the look on his face that something had happened. But then I realized that he meant Rebecca, and he also advised him not to say anything about her to William for the time being. Judith remembered being surprised by the news at the reception, as she was the only one who didn't know about it. Now Locke was more than sure that his brother would not be happy when he heard such news about Rebecca. But Judith decided that she would deal with it herself, because she was angry with him for failing the weapons project again. Screaming, the girl hurried to William to reprimand him, despite the fact that his sister was getting richer by the second. When Judith entered his study, she saw that he was dozing, which only made her angrier. William could not understand what his wife wanted from him, and she immediately admitted that Rebecca was gaining success at this time. She also told her husband that his sister had invented a hair regrowth product that is now sold in the Rovenster store. Judith did not even miss the fact that people were literally ready to fight to get a portion of this potion. William still couldn't understand. He only criticized that his sister should be busy with wedding lessons and not do nonsense. And while Judith continued to lament, her husband also expressed doubts that this success was unlikely to last long. He was sure that this potion would never compare with the new weapon and assured that his next invention would be successful. His wife did not even want to hear such a thing anymore, because he had told her this many times and each time he had failed. She also asked her husband this time to do something different, something that would really sell. But William was not going to become a low-grade alchemist to create meaningless products. He claimed that he was a descendant of Oakline, the one who had created the Philosopher's Stone, and that he had no intention of stooping to such a low level. His wife did not give up, and again reminded him that he was only wasting the family's fortune without earning a cent. Then she got tired of arguing and decided to visit Lady Rebecca, telling her husband that he had lost this time. Left alone, William could not believe that his wife had done this to him, and also that his sister continued to practice alchemy. Then he decided to write a letter to Rebecca, and after a few minutes asked the butler to send it as quickly as possible. William was very angry with her and believed that this girl should be brought to reason, so he wrote to her. Soon the girl read that her brother was asking her to stop practicing alchemy and start teaching lessons for brides. Rosalind, who was nearby, noticed that the girl's face had changed, but she admitted that it was not as angry as she expected. Rebecca then wondered that it wasn't enough for William to recognize her as a true alchemist. But then she saw a letter from Locke. He was interested in her affairs, and also admitted that in secret from William and other students, he studied a hair growth remedy. At the same time, they were very surprised that the girl was able to think of such an extraction of sunrise petals, and Locke praised her. He had always been kind to her and even to the servants, and in the letter he also asked his sister not to take William's words to heart. The girl was pleased that Locke did not forget about her, but now she thought about what else she should do. Rosalind couldn't understand why her mistress was so calm, because she knew that William wouldn't stop at one letter. These days, several of her friends had gathered at Lady Haley's estate for a tea party, and they also wanted to entertain her a little. At the same time, they wondered if the Duchess would allow this to continue, referring to Rebecca's potion. Also, the girls did not believe that the Duke's bride was really so smart and assumed that she was just a fraud. Haley hadn't thought about it before, and she was even struck by the fact that her rival was deceiving people and making money on it. And one girl, Regina, whose family was engaged in the sale of wigs, was sure that Rebecca's case would not affect their business. But she also expressed the opinion that they should not allow the Duke's fiancé to continue to do so. The other girls immediately agreed with her because they were also angry with her for stealing a fiancé from Haley. Regina also considered this wedding absurd only because the imperial family was against the unity of the two ducal families. She then suggested that Carlyle simply had no choice and had to comply with the emperor's wishes. Haley agreed that there was nothing she could do about the situation either, but now she hoped to live quietly for a while. She wanted to heal her broken heart now, but her friend immediately swore that she would teach Rebecca a lesson for her sake. She explained that in a few days the day of St. Marzitina would come, and she would have to attend a service in the church. The Duchess asked her not to bother herself, but she insisted and promised that she would do everything to make Rebecca run away in tears. Deep down, Haley was glad that Regina would arrange everything, and now she hoped that her rival would find out how to be in her place. At this time, Rebecca herself had already gone to the workshop as usual to work, but at the same time she thought about the future holiday. She also knew the history of this holiday because a few hundred years ago the Empire experienced a terrible catastrophe. An evil witch cursed the northern lands, and this curse froze everything under endless snow, causing people to suffer terribly. But soon a certain priestess Marcetina appeared, who sacrificed her own life in order to destroy the witch's curse with holy power. She died right at the scene of the battle, and Saint Marcetina's Day was created in memory of her noble sacrifice. On this day, the entire empire, including the capital, arranges a grandiose celebration, and the saint herself blesses in the main temple. The imperial family and nobles always come to this temple for a holiday, so Rebecca now had to go there. And when that day came, the girl also thought about the fact that she hadn't visited this place for a long time. And today, everyone was waiting for the saint to come out, who was the person chosen by the goddess Artel herself. This saint could not even be pointed out by the emperor himself, since she is the support of the entire empire. And when she came out, she began with a welcoming speech about honoring the memory of Saint Marcetina. Then she said the wish that everyone in this empire would be blessed. Rebecca was so absorbed in the way the saint began to radiate that she forgot what she had to do. Carlyle noticed this and whispered softly to the bride that she should pray right now. The girl pulled herself together and turned to Artel in her mind, asking if meeting with the Duke was part of her plan. And if so, then Rebecca is grateful to her for it because now she is happy every day. A little later, the people came out into a larger hall, and Charlotte had been looking for her mother to approach them for some time. In addition, Carlyle had to leave them and go to guard the emperor, and the girl simply could not wait. Abigail decided to go to the high priest again to discuss something, and understanding the Duchess, Rebecca asked her to wait a little longer. Suddenly, a woman's voice was heard behind them, which immediately greeted Lady Oaklane. When the girls turned around, they saw Regina in front of them, and Charlotte immediately realized that she had come for a reason. She immediately whispered to Rebecca that she knew her, and that she had already sent her several invitations, but she had declined them. She, in turn, confessed that she had come to discuss something with Lady Oaklane, and that she was glad to meet her at last. Rebecca explained that she was very busy, but Regina didn't understand what could be more important than meeting at events. At this point, Charlotte intervened, saying that it was up to her sister-in-law to decide whether to accept invitations to meetings or not. But Regina did not want to talk to her and turned to Rebecca again, giving her a chance to improve. Then she began to explain that she was referring to the scam that Lady Oaklane had recently pulled off. The other people who were standing next to her and heard this were a little shocked, and Rebecca did not understand what she was talking about. Regina then explained that she was now talking about a potion that was sold as a hair growth agent. Charlotte jumped forward again and shouted at the aristocrat not to dare to call her daughter-in-law a fraud. At the same time, Regina assured that alchemy could not help in any way, because even magic and holy power could not cope with this problem. She also confidently stated that alchemy is used only to create magical weapons. At this point, Rebecca declared that it was not necessary to be a magician, and anyone could use a magic lamp created by alchemy. She also reminded that this entire hall is lit thanks to alchemy, and this science can create different things for convenience. Rebecca then asked her not to look down on alchemy, for she herself used such things. Regina replied that nothing else mattered, and that the only thing that mattered now was that the girl was selling deception. After that, she also stated that there were already many victims because of this potion, and that now it is also impossible to know who is bald and who is not. Rebecca still did not understand what kind of nonsense this girl was talking about, and she began to explain again that no nobleman would want to marry a bald woman. Then she began to argue that baldness is inherited and in any case it is a defect. Regina also didn't like the fact that because of this potion, bald people would now enjoy the same privileges as people with hair. However, Rebecca did not believe that bald people should be discriminated against because of their lack of hair. But Regina began to shout that she should not pretend to be complacent after stealing her fiancé from Lady Haley. She also stated that Oaklane had no right to talk about equality and would only agree with her arguments if she married a bald man herself. Then she turned to the others in the room, asking if they wanted to live with bald people or for their children to suffer from baldness. A wave of confusion began in the hall, and many people even supported Regina, shouting that they should get rid of bald people. But some began to be indignant in response, stating that it was not a sin to be bald and that such accusations were absurd. And while the others were arguing among themselves, Regina continued to step on Rebecca, claiming that the potion had caused a big mess. But then she heard a woman's voice behind her that she was the only one who was dividing people here, and was only shifting the blame to Rebecca. Other girls also supported that Lady Oaklane was their savior and should not be judged for nonsense. And then one of them found out that Regina was from a family that made wigs to cover bald heads. But she began to claim that thanks to their family, everyone, on the contrary, began to live a normal life. And again, accusations rained down on her that their wigs were heavy and uncomfortable, and they decided that they would never use them. Some people began to claim that Regina lashed out at Rebecca because she herself was now failing. She herself began to claim the opposite, and then wondered why Oaklane believed that the potion had no side effects. She also pointed out that all alchemy products must be certified by House Carseus, which the potion does not currently have. But Rebecca said that this remedy does not have any side effects because she herself shaved off all her hair. And then Regina fell silent, speechless for a moment, and the girl only repeated that this was how she tested her remedy. She also later added that she repeated this procedure 5 times, and when she heard this, she was shocked not only by Regina, but also by the others. But now Rebecca could assure everyone that her potion had no side effects. The aristocrat could not answer this yet and only believed that this girl was completely abnormal. And then she also stated that her product was actually certified by the House of Rovenster and is now sold in their store. At the same time, she did not think that she still needed to obtain additional certification from House Carseus. However, Regina protested, claiming that House Carseus was second to none, and Charlotte asked her for a compelling reason. She couldn't find the right words right away, and the young duchess only accused her of daring to compare the value of the 2 duchies. Regina tried to answer something, but then another aristocrat stood up for her, who began to beg Charlotte to forgive them. At this time, Rebecca noticed that her future relative could be quite intimidating at times. And while it was explained to Charlotte that they meant that House Carseus knew magic, she decided that her family now had a grievance. After all, their family was well known only at work with swords, but that Regina said that there were no complaints, and again asked for forgiveness. Charlotte also went on to say that her mother and even the Duke of Rovenster himself used Rebecca's products, and she didn't understand how that aristocrat dared to say that the potion had side effects. While Rebecca herself was surprised that Carlisle was using the potion, she was approached by Michaela Arkella, who wanted to talk to her. Other people began to follow her, who also wanted to talk to Lady Oaklane. And then she heard the voice of the saint, who noticed that there had not been such a lively movement in the welcoming hall for a long time. People began to explain to her that this was a hair product that Rebecca had invented. But the saint already knew everything about this remedy, and Lady Oaklane was very surprised. The saint explained that she not only knew, but also that this remedy helped her church. She also admitted that there are a lot of children in their shelter who are hairless because their mothers did not eat enough during pregnancy. And most recently, they received an anonymous donation in the form of this hair growth product. At this time, Regina, who had heard everything, was simply indignant, thinking that now Rebecca would be able to conquer everyone. She immediately turned to the saint, explaining that this potion was effective for no more than 10 days, and that the children would then be disappointed. But the saint was not worried, since the children knew about it, but still wanted to feel like the owners of hair, even for such a short time. Thanks to Rebecca, all these children will now be able to smile again, and this made the author of the product very happy. She also promised to talk to Lady Abigail so that after the production stabilizes, she can make regular donations to them. The saint was sincerely grateful that Rebecca wanted to help the children, and in gratitude she decided to tell her a prophecy. People around were immediately very surprised because even the emperor rarely manages to get a prophecy from the saint. And she said that soon this means would become a great blessing for the empire. Hearing this, Regina almost fainted, and her friends began to worry around her. And while the rest of the people looked in surprise, Rebecca thanked the saint for such a prophecy. She, in turn, wished success to the girl, and also that she would contact her if she needed help. Then the saint also asked to visit her sometime and left, and Rebecca remained standing as if hypnotized. Seeing her condition, Charlotte became very worried, assuming that she had been so affected by Regina's attack and the saint's generosity. She just stood and continued to muttering under her breath that the great saint supported her, and even tears welled up in her eyes. A little later, on the way home in the carriage, Abigail learned the details. Now she understood why her daughter-in-law was crying. Rebecca will never be able to forget the day when she received the prophecy and the support of Her Holiness. Charlotte also explained that she had been in this state for some time, but at the same time she was apparently happy. But then Rebecca returned to reality and turned to her sister, reminding her that Carlisle had also used her remedy. Charlotte laughed, and the girl thought it was a lie, but she admitted that it wasn't. One day she gave the product to the butler so that he could use it to care for Carlisle's hair. Her brother fully entrusts the butler to take care of his appearance, so he most likely does not even know that he is using this tool. Charlotte then joked a little that her brother might not even notice if the butler rubbed salt instead of cream on him. Abigail then expressed the hope that Rebecca did not take Regina's words to heart and advised her not to let herself be offended. For a moment, the girl even forgot who Regina was, but then she explained that she was just very infatuated with the saint. A few days later, Duchess Abigail called her son to her, and he was not long in coming. For a few minutes, the lady said nothing, but only stared intently at his hair. Then she said approvingly, but the Duke still did not understand what she meant. Only Abigail did not explain to him the reasons for the inspection, but admitted that she had heard rumors that were hovering among the nobles. And this time, the rumors concerned Rebecca, as if the entire royal family was behind her and supported the role of his bride. In addition, Carlisle, who had previously been in awe of Lady Haley, left her and is now ready to marry Rebecca due to pressure from the royal family. The Duke couldn't believe that such rumors had spread and was sure that House Carsius was behind it, and Abigail agreed. But she did not want her daughter-in-law's reputation to suffer anymore and advised her son to go to the opera with her that evening. The Duchess also handed him 2 tickets and repeated again that he simply had to go on a date. Abigail then added that all the rumors would immediately disappear if Carlisle showed that he and Rebecca were a happy couple. The Duke agreed, but only for the sake of the girl. And this pleased the Duchess, but also that Rebecca realized the value of her talent. She believed that she needed to rethink her past failures and choose more products for commerce. Abigail also added that she did not want her daughter-in-law to be bothered by false rumors, so she asked her son to help her. She also asked Carlisle not to tell his fiancée anything, because she would only convince her that she did not care about any rumors. The Duke agreed with his mother again and was going to go to Rebecca right now. When he came to the workshop, he noticed new smells and a slight fog, and not immediately seeing the girl, he began to call her. She immediately appeared in front of him and invited him in, but Carlisle could tell from the look on her face that he was at the wrong time. The girl assured him that this was not the case and immediately went to open the window wider. She then also admitted that Madame Abigail had asked her to think about the next product, so she was going through her old designs. The Duke realized that the girl was really at a crucial moment, but at the same time he noticed that she had soot on her face. Rebecca tried to wipe it, but it didn't hit, and even after the next prompt until Carlisle asked permission to help her. Taking out a handkerchief, the Duke gently brushed the dirt from her face and then smiled at her rather sweetly. Rebecca was even a little embarrassed, and the Duke admitted that his mother had high hopes for her, as did Charlotte. The girl admitted that, in her opinion, they are very overestimating her, but she will still try to meet their expectations. She explained that they were very kind to her, and then Carlisle suggested that she accept one good deed from him as well. Then he handed Rebecca a ticket to the opera, which she was sincerely surprised at but agreed to go with him that evening. In the evening, Carlisle was ready to leave, and in doing so he realized that the butler had overdone it a little with the spirits. And then Rebecca came out to him, who immediately apologized for keeping him waiting. The Duke reassured that everything was fine and offered to go when the girl suddenly stumbled. She immediately explained that she very rarely wears high-heeled shoes, while she felt embarrassed. But Carlisle, on the contrary, only leaned over her and then helped put the shoe back on her foot. He also offered to lean on it if it was so difficult for her to walk in these shoes, and gave her hand. Rebecca felt very strange at this moment, and also that her heart began to pound very wildly. After a while, they were already sitting in the box, and the girl wondered why it was opera because the Duke did not like this. Carlisle agreed that Rebecca already knew him quite well and that he really didn't like opera. He also admitted that he did not remember the last time he was at the opera, but when his mother gave tickets, he thought that the girl would want to go. Rebecca was pleased to hear this, but then she asked him not to force himself to do something he didn't like. The Duke chuckled, and then suggested that she find something they would both like for their next date. At this time, the pair were noticed by other people in the opera, and they began to gossip that Carlisle turned out to be romantic, since he brought his bride here. Others, who had also heard that he had been forced to marry, could now be convinced that this was not the case at all. The Duke at this time looked at the bride attentively and then straightened her lock of hair, which had become tangled. Immediately a screech was heard from the side, and the girl realized that this was the reaction of people to his movements. Carlisle was glad that she understood him, and Rebecca felt that people had come here not to see the opera, but to see them. Then glasses of wine were brought to them, and the girl decided to immediately drink a little to relax. From the first sip, the taste seemed very sharp to her, and she even shuddered and grimaced. But then the aftertaste seemed very pleasant to her, and she immediately drank a few more sips. Watching the bride's reaction, she seemed even a little funny to the Duke, and he smiled. Then an opera called The Love of a Nobleman began, and an actor came on stage and began to pronounce his speech loudly. He said that the young lord lost his memory after an accident, but continued to live, receiving care from commoners. But over time, he gradually regained his memory and healed his tired heart. In addition, this nobleman fell in love with a beautiful commoner and decided to cross the boundaries of social status. Many people found this opera interesting, but Rebecca was not of such an opinion and even thought that she would soon fall asleep. But then, there was a loud sound and another actor came on stage, and the girl decided that there must be something interesting. Only it was the presenter who announced a break, and then the Duke invited Rebecca to go out into the fresh air for this time. As they stood on the balcony, Carlyle also noticed that his fiancée did not like the opera. The girl wondered how he understood this, and the Duke admitted that he also found her boring. Then Rebecca remembered that his mother had given him the tickets, and he confessed that she was very fond of romantic operas. Carlyle also said that when his father was still alive, he and his mother were a very happy couple. Then the girl noticed that their parents were very similar, because her father also loved her mother very much. Then they stood silent for a few minutes, as if pondering important thoughts, and looked at the evening landscape in front of them. And suddenly, Carlyle offered to return home, because the opera was not interesting. But the girl remembered that they had to show themselves as a happy couple. The Duke agreed only because his fiancée wanted it, and soon they returned to their balcony in the theater. Carlyle decided to entertain the situation and asked if Rebecca liked wine. The girl admitted that there is indeed one more thing that she loves, as well as alchemy and this wine. The Duke admitted that he himself is a fan of this drink, and that he drinks any other alcohol quite rarely. Then they began to guess who liked which wine, and the girl admitted that she liked the Dawn of the Desert. She also admitted that she had tried it only a few times, but the taste seemed unforgettable to her. The Duke assumed that it was made from grapes grown in the desert, and then asked when Rebecca first tasted the wine. While talking, they did not notice how the second act flew by, and then they went to the carriage. Carlyle noticed that his fiancée looked tired, and she admitted that the opera was really tiring. Soon the Duke noticed that a traffic jam had formed from the carriages, as a lot of spectators had arrived. And since they now had a long way to go, he suggested that they continue their conversation about wine. Rebecca admitted that she started using it because of alchemy, and Carlyle realized that she had everything to do with alchemy. The girl confirmed this, and also that there were times when she did not sleep at night to finish the study. So she decided that if she drank wine at night, she would be able to concentrate better like her father. This seemed strange to the Duke because people usually feel drowsy after wine. But the girl assured that for the Oak Lane family it was just the opposite, and that Rosalind had secretly brought her wine. She then questioned the Duke, and he confessed that he had been ill very often as a child, although he now looked strong. And one day they brought him warm wine so that he could take it as medicine. But after he became a swordmaster, wine turned into his best friend, and he drank it to sleep better. Arriving home, the girl felt that the conversation brought her pleasant sensations, but she still wanted to rest. The girl wished the Duke good night and, saying goodbye, prepared to go to her room. But then Carlyle stopped her and asked her to walk with him to a certain place, being sure that she would like it. Rebecca didn't know where they were going, but she trusted, and was shocked when he brought her to the wine cellar. There was a lot of different wine, and then the Duke took out one of the bottles, which turned out to be the Dawn of the Desert. And while the girl continued to experience shock, Carlyle offered her a drink in his room. Rebecca agreed, and when they were already there, she admitted that it was the first time she had visited his room. Carlyle thought to himself that she was also the first girl he had invited here. Then she admitted that she was surprised, because she thought that the Duke's room should be larger and more luxurious. He explained that it was the Duke's chambers that were in another room, but he rarely used them. Carlyle also tried to change his room several times, but this was the one he was most comfortable with. Rebecca remembered from Charlotte's conversation that he had changed rooms because women had sneaked up on him earlier. But the Duke explained that the situation with this became calmer after one of the violators was punished. He also decided to change the topic of conversation and offered to uncork a bottle of wine that they brought with them. Rebecca was delighted that this was her favorite brand and asked to open it herself. She also added that she knows that according to the rules of decency, the bottle should be opened by a man. She just wanted to discover the Dawn of the Desert on her own, and the Duke did not contradict her. After giving the bride the bottle, Carlyle also asked her not to tell his mother. He just didn't want to listen to her regret that she hadn't been able to raise a real gentleman. The girl agreed, but at the same time noted that the Duchess raised the most wonderful son. And at that moment, the cork jumped out of the bottle, and Rebecca immediately caught a pleasant aroma with her nose. This aroma had always seemed divine to her, and she recalled again that she had first tasted it when the bottle was given to her father. Since then, she had a dream of uncorking such a bottle herself, and now the girl seemed just happy. Then Carlyle asked her permission to pour the first glass, and she did not argue with him. When the intoxicating drink was already in the glass, Rebecca also could not get enough of its perfect appearance. And the Duke at this time admitted that it was actually the first time he had tasted the dawn of the desert, but his father liked it very much. After his death, Abigail collected as many bottles as she could, and upon hearing this, the girl thought that she shouldn't have drunk it. But Carlyle assured that she didn't need to worry, and that his mother wasn't the kind of person to get upset about such things. He also suggested that if Rebecca confessed to the Duchess that she liked wine, then she could give her a wine cellar. Then they proposed a toast to it and drank a few sips of taste, which delighted the girl again. And when Carlyle tasted it, he admitted that he now understood why Rebecca and his father were fans of this wine. Then the Duke remembered that in the second act of the opera she looked very serious, but he decided that it had nothing to do with the opera. Rebecca was in no hurry to share what was bothering her in a way, but then she asked. She assumed that the Duke had previously liked someone, and she knew that he had to go through a lot because of his popularity. The girl suggested that he was sought not only by beauties but also by rather strange ladies, from which he even choked. Still, Carlyle admitted that he had never felt any sympathy for anyone before. At this point, Rebecca was amazed, because she had exactly the same situation. She also admitted that she had never loved anyone before. She then suggested that it made them both strange, and the Duke agreed that she might be right about that. He explained that he had once asked himself about it, and thought it was because of the people who tortured him. But Carlyle also thought that he was only using them as an excuse to run away from the problem. Then the girl remembered that in the opera, the main character gave up everything for the sake of his love. At the same time, she thought about herself that she would hardly be able to give up alchemy for the sake of any person. Rebecca also admitted that she agreed to enter into this contract because she did not want to let go of her passion for alchemy. At the same time, she has not stopped asking herself the question of whether she will be able to give it up one day for the sake of her loved one. The Duke advised her not to dwell on the person who makes her choose one or the other. At the same time, he really wanted her to be able to love someone who could protect her. Rebecca thought it was a wonderful idea to love someone who could protect what she held dear. Carlyle also admitted that he used to drink alone, but now he is very pleased that he has company. He also suggested that they are together, although under a contract, but they can still share their innermost thoughts. Rebecca didn't mind and suggested that he start first, but he wanted to ask her something. Carlyle also thought that this question was very uncomfortable, but the girl assured that everything was fine and he could ask. Then he admitted that earlier women just hung on him, but now he admires the fact that Rebecca treats him like an ordinary person. And then, looking at her enthusiastic eyes, the Duke asked her to admit if she really felt something for him. The girl was a little confused, but then muttered that in general she liked him. And the Duke again admitted that when he was next to her, he felt like an ordinary person. Rebecca even joked that he usually didn't feel like an ordinary person, and then remembered that he was a swordmaster. She also noticed that the young Duke was quite handsome and tall, and he suddenly wondered what Rebecca's ideal man was. The girl was again confused with the answer because she had never thought about it before. Carlyle then assumed that she found him attractive and should understand the difference. The girl understood him and thought for a couple of seconds, and then said that he was her standard. Rebecca admitted that she finds anyone who looks like him attractive and who is not attractive. The Duke only laughed in response, realizing that she had just made it up, but the girl said that it was not so. She then added that she liked someone who could protect her alchemy, hoping that such an answer would count. Rebecca also admitted that she may not be the most reasonable person, but she learns very quickly. And then she yawned, stretched, and said that she was sleepy and was about to go back to her room. Carlyle offered to accompany her, but the girl assured her that it was not necessary, but he insisted. And when she reached her room, the girl politely wished him good night, and the Duke did the same in return. Before leaving, however, he suggested that she should drink together again sometime, if she did not mind. Rebecca immediately agreed and closed the door behind her, leaving the Duke in thought. After a while, Carlyle was staying with the Emperor, and Chancellor Kaliza from a neighboring kingdom came to receive him. He expressed gratitude that Oberith had agreed to accept the kingdom of Rowan and to lend a helping hand. He in turn admitted that a very long time had passed and he no longer thought that the Chancellor would personally visit him. Kalyza confessed that he missed their wine and also prepared a small gift for the Emperor. He then presented him with mana stones that had recently been discovered in the western region of Rowana. Oberith liked the gift. He did not even think that their king would be so generous. At the same time, he thought that if the king decided to donate so many stones, then perhaps he hoped to export them to his empire. At the same time, the Chancellor was also the younger brother of the king, and his entire delegation looked quite friendly. The Duke realized that importing the stones would be good news for the alchemists who made magical items. Carlyle also wondered how Rebecca would react to this and decided that he would definitely share this news with her. After a while, a luxurious table was laid in the hall, where the Emperor treated the guests as a sign of gratitude. At the same time, he shared with the Duke his suspicions that their visit today was for a reason. After all, they had the advantage, but now they only wanted an exclusive export agreement and lower tariffs. Carlyle suggested that they wanted to be their allies, but Oberith objected, admitting that he had a bad feeling. At the same time, he saw that the deal was too good to pass up, but their scouts also had no information. Soon, a servant approached the Emperor and reported that the Chancellor wanted a personal audience. Oberith agreed and ordered Kalis to be escorted to his office, as well as wine and snacks to be prepared. The servant obeyed, but added that the Chancellor wished the Duke to join in as well. Carlyle was a little surprised at this and glanced at the Chancellor, who only smiled sweetly. Already in the study, the Emperor began to ask the guest what he really wanted because everything was really going too smoothly. He replied that His Highness was too informal when they were alone, but Oberith believed that they had been friends long enough for this, and again asked for truthful intentions. Then Kalyza admitted that he actually had one request and looked in the direction of the Duke again. Carlyle realized that the request was related to him, and the Chancellor confirmed his hunch. But then he clarified a little and said that this request was related to his fiancée, which surprised Oberith and the Duke. He then went on to say that it was about her hair growth product, and also added that their kingdom needed it. Then Kalyza suggested that the Emperor should already know why they needed this. Oberith confirmed that his intelligence bureau had reported that King Rowana was balding. And then the Chancellor decided to tell me something else, and asked me to think of it as the story of an ordinary man named Miners. He then went on to say that his brother Miners wasn't the crown prince and he actually wanted to live like a general. At the same time, Carlyle remembered that this was the same person who said that he hated politics because it gave him a headache. Kalyza also went on to say that their kingdom was protected by a barrier of blessed relic that protected against monsters. And this relic itself chooses the heir to the kingdom, so the second prince started the war out of anger at the decision of the relic. As a result of this war, he and the crown prince were killed, but the war ended thanks to Estain's neutral position. And this part of the story was known to everyone, and now the Chancellor was going to share the secret of their kingdom. The mystery was that his brother categorically renounced the throne after being chosen by a relic. Oberith understood why he had done so, for he knew Miner's character well. Nevertheless, he took the throne, but repeatedly threatened to resign if people disagreed with his personal affairs. And now it was about their queen, who also did not want to hold this position. But after they entered into a marriage of convenience, the Chancellor's brother made a lot of effort to win her heart. Soon they even began to discuss the question of an heir, and now Oberith and Carlyle could not understand what the problem was. The Chancellor confirmed that this was not the worst thing, but it was at this time that Miners began to lose his hair. At the same time, his baldness occurs very quickly, so now they need Rebecca's help. At this point, the Duke expressed that he seemed to be the only one who did not understand the situation. To this, the Emperor only shouted at him that he even dared to think of such a thing. Then he asked him to imagine how he had won the heart of his love twice, and then he suddenly began to go bald. But the Duke still claimed that Queen Rowana never said that she hated bald people. Then the Chancellor said that in general no woman likes a bald man, which was also confirmed by Oberith. Kalyza was afraid that the Queen no longer loved his brother, and because of this, he could not sleep even at night. At this time, the Emperor was also carried away by this thought and stated that even a person of royal blood could fall madly in love. And the Chancellor added that because of this problem, the birth of an heir is postponed, which is why they risk losing their pedigree. He also stated that Miners threatens to abdicate if he returns without a hair growth product. And then the Emperor assumed that the king wished to keep secret that he was balding, and also that the remedy should be delivered secretly. Kalyza confirmed this and asked for 10 vials to be prepared for him for the first time. The Duke replied that he needed to discuss this with his mother first, but the Chancellor added that they had already contacted Lady Abigail. The Duchess told them that the product was reserved for months in advance, and if they started exporting it now, there would be a riot among buyers. The Duke and the Emperor conferred that it would be very difficult to change Abigail's mind, and then the Chancellor interjected again. He assured them that their request would not be free, and immediately opened a chest full of various magic stones. Carlyle thought that such stones could make his bride very happy, and then asked the Chancellor to wait a while. The Duke really needed to discuss this with his family, and Oberith remarked that the saint's prophecy had come true. Carlyle did not understand what he meant, and the Emperor explained that, according to the prophecy, this remedy would be a great boon to the empire. The Duke doubted that this was the great prophecy, but he remained silent and simply decided to leave them. Carlyle explained that if he left now, he would be able to give the stones to Rebecca right away, as she was working in the workshop at the time. The Emperor was surprised to hear that the Duke remembered such things and thought that this girl was the one for Carlyle. When the Duke brought the stones to his bride, she was overjoyed because these stones were really very rare. She knew perfectly well that they had the best qualities, so they were absolutely priceless. And while Carlise and her mother were pleased that Rebecca liked the stones, the maid announced that a visitor had come to the girl. The man immediately peeked through the door, and Rebecca recognized him as Master Lloyd. The girl had not seen him for a long time and was very glad to see him, because he had taught her something. The maid was embarrassed, for she did not know that the Duke and his mother were there, and offered to accompany the guest to the drawing room. But Abigail assured that everything was fine, and then asked her daughter-in-law to introduce her guest to them. The girl said that this was Master Lloyd, the chief alchemist of the International Alchemical Association. In addition, he had also worked in the Oaklane's workshop a few years earlier, and the Duchess greeted him politely. She also asked what he had come for, and he admitted that he had come to ask Rebecca for a potion. Then he hesitated a little, not knowing whether to confess in front of the Duke and his mother, but then confessed that he was there because of his son and his wife. He also explained that they were having trouble conceiving a child, and now he needed the potion she had made earlier. Rebecca couldn't remember what kind of potion it was, and then the old man quietly explained that he needed a potion of masculinity. The Duke and his mother did hear this and were quite shocked that such a potion existed, and Carlyle asked the old alchemist to tell him more about it and tell him the whole story. The Duchess was also surprised, but she began to question Rebecca to explain what it was. The girl was embarrassed, but admitted that she had made several potions by mistake in the past. Then she asked the master to check one of them, and the effect was quite strange, so she realized that it was a potion of masculinity. Lloyd confirmed that he had tried it himself, and that it really worked, and that he had a good life with his wife. But then he suddenly settled down, because he had not come here to talk about it, and began to ask the girl to make a potion. Carlyle still couldn't figure out what kind of potion they were talking about, but his mother decided to take him away and make business plans with him. The Duchess apologized to the guest for leaving them so soon, and Rebecca remarked that she was very excited. Lloyd also apologized to the girl, hoping that he had not caused any inconvenience with his requests. He then remarked that her workshop looked amazing and admitted that he thought she had given up alchemy because of her engagement. Lloyd also heard about her hair growth remedy and praised her, calling her a genius and a true alchemist. The girl thanked him in return, and he remembered that Rebecca had always wanted to help people with the help of alchemy. Then he scratched his beard a little and then decided to invite her to join the International Association of Alchemists. The girl could not believe that she heard this, and Lloyd admitted that he could not offer it to her before because of her father's disapprovals. But now things were different. Besides, he himself is now the head of the association, and with his recommendation, Rebecca will very quickly join. She thanked him again, and the old man decided to ask her what had become of the mystery left by the legendary Oaklane. He also admitted that he was sure that the girl would be able to solve this riddle and avoid marriage. Rebecca confirmed that she could have avoided the marriage, but then she would have faced other problems. She also said that this is not something that can be used with carelessness. Lloyd grinned and thought that this girl had solved the riddle after all, and then he remembered her father. He never understood why Hames could not recognize her as a real alchemist. But he also knew that old Oaklane would regret it someday, but then he would hardly be able to help. After a while, Rebecca was summoned by the Duchess and decided to get straight to the point. Now, this lady was interested in the potion of masculinity, and she stated that they would be able to sell it at any price they wanted. The girl did not mind selling this potion, which Abigail was a little surprised by, thinking that it would be difficult for her to make such a decision. Rebecca also knew that it was not customary for a decent young lady to talk about such a thing, so she felt a little uncomfortable. But then she admitted that she had recently had an idea, and that she didn't think she would ever be able to get married. She then stated that when the contract ended, she would not return to her family, but would become an independent alchemist. She really could not imagine herself doing something else, so she refuses to get married. The girl was also sure that no man would want to marry a girl who was engaged in alchemy. But with all this, she will need money, which is why she agrees to work much harder as soon as the opportunity arises. The Duchess realized that she didn't care what happened to her reputation afterwards, nor that her son understood Rebecca's position. At the same time, Abigail understood that she was unlikely to find a lady like this girl anywhere else, even if she was an eccentric one. The Duchess knew she might be a weirdo, but that was what made her so interesting. In addition, Rebecca had impeccable manners, and she was also very talented. Abigail even considered her son stupid now, because this girl was just an ideal wife for him. Then Rebecca noticed that the Duchess was thinking, but then she came to her senses and apologized for drowning in thoughts. At the same time, she continued to think that you never know what can happen between a man and a woman. And Abigail told the girl that she was against her using her name to sell this product. Also, the Duchess had an idea and asked her daughter-in-law to give her some of this potion. Rebecca returned to her room and immersed herself in her work, and Rosalind noticed that her mistress was making 2 potions at the same time. The girl assured that she was not overworking at all, and besides, the potion of masculinity was not difficult at all, and only she could do it because Lloyd tried to improve it earlier, but he failed. The secret was that the alchemist's energy naturally converted into magic potions. Therefore, the girl manages to make such a potion, although she herself did not understand what energy has to do with it. Rosalind noticed that many vials had already been made, and asked how much potion the Duchess needed. Rebecca confessed that she had asked to make it bigger, and now she was going to give 5 bottles to Lloyd and 7 to the Duchess. The other 3, which remained, the girl decided to give to King Rowan, believing that it would not be enough to send him hair products. Rosalind worried that with such a gift, the king might think that they wanted to insult him. She also explained that men have a different attitude to their power, but the girl again did not quite understand her. At this time, the Duke was just in training, but all his thoughts were occupied with Rebecca and this new potion. Even his soldier friend noticed that today the gentleman seemed to be stuck in his thoughts and asked him to return to reality. And after some time in the kingdom of Rowana, the king had already tried a hair growth remedy and was delighted. He had heard earlier that the effect of this potion was incredible, but it exceeded all his expectations. Admiring his new thick hair, Miners decided to go straight to Her Majesty's. But first he asked the Chancellor how long this effect would last, and he explained that 10 days. Kaliza also reported that he had only brought 5 vials this time, and that the rest would be delivered as soon as they were made. Then he handed the king another box and explained that it was a gift from Lady Rebecca. He also added that the girl had prepared this especially for the king, and he immediately began to consider the gift. Miners saw that it was a potion of masculinity and decided right away that Rebecca thought he lacked masculine strength. The Chancellor explained that she did not mean anything bad, and the king agreed that it was not worth reacting like that and asked to convey his gratitude to her. The next day, Miners found the Chancellor again, who thought that something had happened to the king, as he had missed the meeting and dinner. He did not explain anything, but only began to ask if there was a way to bring Rebecca to their kingdom. Kaliza did not understand her master, and then he carefully explained that he had decided to try her new potion the night before. He also liked the effect very much, and stated that he had a very good time with the queen and even met the sunrise. But now the king was simply infuriated that such a talented girl as Rebecca was not in their kingdom because she was a real treasure. Then he seized the Chancellor and began to demand from him, like a madman, that he find a way to lure her to their kingdom. Kaliza was afraid to even think about it. He was sure that the Empire would stop them immediately, if not destroy them. He also reminded the king who Lady Rebecca was engaged to. But then Miners came up with an idea. He stated that it was possible to open a branch of the Rovensters in their kingdom, and the Chancellor promised to do everything in his power. At this time, Duchess Abigail was again visiting at the tea party, and the aristocrats were animatedly discussing various topics. She also mentioned that Lady Haley had been acting strange lately, recruiting young ladies and lords at a terrifying rate. They also remembered how Haley had expressed herself at the Carseus ball, saying that their lake was no more than a stagnant puddle now. And the young Duchess did not understand how a swan could swim in such a lake, so she thought it was time to pull out the weeds. Also threateningly, Haley stated that a storm awaited them once the cleaned lake refilled. The aristocrats understood that by the lake she meant high society, and she considered noble ladies like them to be stagnant water. Hearing all this, the Duchess decided that Lady Haley was wary of them, at least of her. Abigail also noticed that this girl had given up trying to be accepted by her and Charlotte, and realized that she would not win Carlisle's heart. The Duchess also assumed that Haley considered them a nuisance and was unhappy that she and Rebecca were on good terms. Abigail also understood that if she wanted to exclude the old nobles, then high society would split into two sides. This conflict was bound to affect politics and the imperial court, and she thought Haley's actions were foolish. The Duchess promised the aristocrats that she would soon make a decision, but for now she decided to share a new product with them. All the aristocrats immediately received a box and began to carefully examine the contents. Abigail explained to them that it was a potion of masculinity, and they would definitely be pleased with the effects of its effects. She also assured that it was an effective potion, and she hoped that her friends would be able to help their husbands with it. The aristocrats were pleased that the Duchess never left them without attention and gave them various gifts. The next day, in the late afternoon, Abigail met with these aristocrats again and asked how they were doing. The women immediately swooped down on her with gratitude, as the potion really worked wonders, and their husbands had noticeably improved. Also, the aristocrats admitted that before her arrival they came up with a name for this product, believing that the evening rose is very suitable. Abigail thought for a moment, but at the same time she realized that she liked this name too, and she decided that she would keep it. She thanked her friends, and they in turn asked her to reserve more portions for them. The Duchess had previously thought about making this product in limited access, because this way she could help Rebecca as well. In addition, she decided that it was necessary to increase the price of this product, but she knew that in any case the case would be crowned with success. The Duchess also decided that this product would only be sold through their guild. People can only get this potion by inviting her or one of the aristocrats to whom she has already given it. The women were delighted with the suggestion, but now they had a lot to do, and they said goodbye to Abigail. But the Marchioness Rimador lingered and held out a small box, asking him to give it to the potion maker. The aristocrat did not explain in detail what it was, but assured that Rebecca would definitely like it. When the girls received this gift, they were just delighted, because it was the famous cake from the Ramadier Café. The Duchess was pleased that her daughter-in-law liked this treat, and Rebecca remembered how she once met this marquise in a café. She then praised her hair product very much, and now the girl offered to call her to eat this cake together. Rebecca also explained that she was almost done with her work, so she had some free time. At the same time, the Duchess also wondered if her daughter-in-law had come up with anything else that their company could present. The girl nodded in agreement, and then admitted that she really had something else. She had taken away everything she had done before, and now she was exposing it to Abigail and Charlotte for inspection. One of them was a magical accessory, and it was a bead that falls out when turned. And if you throw this bead at someone, then this person will be temporarily paralyzed for about 10 minutes. The girl believed that it was not fatal, and there was no need to use it as a weapon. Then she showed the necklace, and if you rub the back of it, it will light up for a moment. Charlotte wondered what happens when it glows, and learned that this light also blinds the eyes for a while. Rebecca also introduced a magic powder that makes the inhaler sneeze heavily, and after showing a few more objects, the girl thought that it would be nice to come up with something new. But then the Duchess looked at her daughter meaningfully, and they both realized that they were thinking the same thing. Then Abigail offered her daughter-in-law everything that she presented to them to also put on sale. The girl was a little confused by such a proposal, and the Duchess decided to explain her decision to her. The fact is that all these items were ideal as means of self-defense, especially for girls. Charlotte admitted that she had heard rumors that someone was following Mrs. Chloe. She explained that she was a popular singer and became famous after starring in an opera called A Nobleman's Love. The Duchesses believed that their favorite actress should not suffer because of this and not fear for her life. In addition, the follower was rumored to be a nobleman, and the girls understood that Mrs. Chloe, as a commoner, would find it difficult to get rid of him. Abigail also understood that although the capital was relatively safe, there were exceptions, and any crime could not be predicted. In their own estate, one could feel safe, as they were protected by the Duke. But other nobles may well need similar things, and not only them, but also the rest of the people in the empire. Abigail was referring to all residents, not just women, but also children and the elderly, as well as the disabled. The Duchesses were delighted with these products and again offered Rebecca to sell them as means of self-defense. The girl was a little surprised because she herself did not think before that these things could be used for this. She liked the idea and readily agreed, with Abigail adding that the magic bracelet could also be offered to knights. Rebecca also promised to think about modifying them, and Charlotte at this time offered to give them a quite affordable price. The girl also suggested that you can replace some materials to make it cheaper, but this will also limit the use of products. The Duchess once again noticed that the girl who is the bride of her son is really a very talented person. She thought again that Rebecca would be the best wife the Duke could not have dreamed of. Returning to her room, the girl asked Rosalind to prepare snacks for the wine, as she was in the mood for a great drink today. At the same time, the maid took the liberty of suggesting that she call the Duke into the company, for they had hardly seen each other in the last few days. Rebecca objected, because she knew that he had also been very busy lately and was now obviously mired in paperwork. Rosalind had advised her to call him anyway, because she had noticed that he liked her mistress, and she wanted them to be truly happy. The girl still refused, but on the way to her room, she still could not stop thinking about her maid's proposal. For a moment, she even decided to go and only ask if he would mind having a glass of wine with her. But then, she suddenly thought that she wouldn't know what to do if Carlyle really fell in love with her. Then she decided that she would not go to him, but just at that moment the door she had passed opened and the Duke looked out. For a moment their eyes met, and Rebecca wondered again that she didn't know how he would feel when he loved her. Now she also realized that she had reached his office in thought without even noticing it. But the Duke interrupted her thoughts by asking why she had come here, and she immediately admitted that she was going to drink some wine. Carlyle chuckled and said that he didn't really mind having a drink or two. The girl was immediately embarrassed and began to persuade him that he should not force himself to do this and offered to drink another time. She understood that he had a lot of work to do and really did not want to distract him in any way. The Duke explained that he did have a lot of paperwork, but Rebecca did not bother him at all, and he could spare her time. At the same time, the girl noticed that he looked tense, and then he also admitted that he wanted to ask her something. Rebecca was a little confused, but agreed to listen to him, and soon they were sitting at a table on the terrace. In order to diffuse the situation a little, the girl decided to pay attention to the moon and said that it was very bright today. She also noticed that under such moonlight the garden looked very delightful, and the Duke was glad that she liked it. Rebecca also noticed that a night with such a bright moon was perfect for picking moonflowers. At this time, Carlyle was just about to open the bottle himself, and the girl now realized that she could safely communicate with him. Then the Duke proposed a toast to drink to his bride, because he had already heard from his mother about her new products. The girl also thought that these were wonderful magical things and agreed to drink to it. At the same time, she noticed that the taste of wine today was something unusual, but she thought that it was because they were drinking it under the moonlight. Then she noticed that the Duke looked a little embarrassed, and he still did not dare to ask the question that interested him. But then Carlyle finally found the right words and asked directly how she came up with a remedy that was created for men. He also admitted that he had recently read Oaklane's biography, and thanks to it, he also became interested in alchemy. The girl realized that the Duke simply felt uncomfortable, so she decided to abruptly change the subject. But she decided to support him, and agreed to talk about alchemy, suggesting that we talk about her ancestor as well. Carlyle admitted that he would be interested to hear about such a legendary Oaklane from his own descendant. Rebecca then said that Oaklane's biography is a story of light, but the one she knows is a story of darkness. The Duke did not quite understand his bride, and she explained that where there is light, there is always darkness. She also clarified that this applies to this book, and it does not contain any of the suffering that Oaklane endured. And as she continued to talk, she noticed that Carlyle was embarrassed again, and also blushed at this. He did not know how to explain his condition to him exactly, but asked her to continue his story. And Rebecca explained that it was the Philosopher's Stone which was Oaklane's greatest achievement, and that everyone knew about. This stone can turn any metal into gold, and if it is melted and drunk, you can become immortal. Many also believe that after Oaklane created the Philosopher's Stone, he went off to enjoy his wealth and immortality. But in reality, he didn't get his happy ending, because he never planned to create the Philosopher's Stone. It's just that his son was suffering from a fatal disease, and trying to develop a cure, he succeeded. He managed to cure his son, but in doing so, his family was in danger because many wanted to take possession of this stone. That is why he and his family wandered for many years, hiding from such people. But they were eventually found, and Oaklane lost his wife Elizabeth, and after her death, he fell into despair. Also, after that, his only son was in mortal danger, and he had to make one decision. The Duke even listened to his fiancée, but at the same time suggested that Oaklane decided to go to the Artel for help. Rebecca confirmed this, and Artel agreed to protect his son, but she made it a condition that he would never create the stone again. The Artel really understood that the Philosopher's Stone would bring chaos to this world, and then the Duke remembered something. He read in the book that Oaklane had left the recipe for the stone as a riddle, and wondered if it was true. The girl confirmed, and Carlyle realized that since no one had created the stone yet, then no one had solved this riddle. Rebecca was silent for a moment, but then she looked at her fiancé meaningfully, not knowing how to tell him the real truth.